Just a heads up to everybody, the recording has started.
Okay. We must be anxious. We're all in our places at 6:29. Something's going on. Any rule against starting early? Oh, there we go. Well, it's 6:30. I'd like to call the Planning Commissioner meeting to order, October 21st, 2025. Would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Commissioner Bowman.
Present.
Commissioner Fatizzi.
Present.
Commissioner Furnett, present. Commissioner Jasper.
Present.
Commissioner Sexton.
Here.
Commissioner Huggins.
Present.
And Commissioner DeVoynes has called in. Won't be here. So he's out. So, moving right along, consent agenda. We're going to approve 3 different months, May, June, and July. We'll start with May. I think, if I recall, we already approved it with minor corrections in June, but any comments on May? Those in favor of passing May, can I get a motion to pass May as written?
I'll make a motion to pass the May meeting minutes as written.
Commissioner
second.
Sexton first, Commissioner Fatizzi second. All those in favor of passing May minutes as written, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Okay. Moving on to June 17th minutes. Everybody have a chance to read those? Any comments on June 17th minutes? Okay, no comments. Can I get a motion to pass June 17th?
I make a motion to approve the June 17th meeting minutes as written.
Commissioner Fatizzi is first, second.
I'll second.
Commissioner
Sexton.
Sexton. Looking that way, I got confused. All those in favor of approving June 17th?
Aye.
Aye.
I abstain. I wasn't present.
Yeah, I'll also abstain, yeah.
Okay. June 17th is passed as written, 2 for 2. And what's the last one? June, July. We got to do July 15th. Everyone have a chance to read those?
Just out of curiosity, looking at the meeting minutes, Who's keeping the meeting? I think Nicole's keeping the meeting minutes. There's usually a lot more volume that we're used to, so I'm just looking at it. It's pretty brief. It just goes through the agenda. So as we're going through the different agenda items, I mean, this is fine for now, but as we move forward, especially into the 10-year comp plan update and a lot more details, we definitely want to record more. And sometimes, I guess, going back to the video to replay it, that would be helpful as well. But this is fine for now, but moving forward, it's usually more extensive than this. That's where Danielle came in really great on the corrections to grammar and everything in between. That's all I have.
In most cases, as long as we capture the motion, that's the most important part.
Agree.
And we can fill in some detail, but we do try to avoid doing a word for word type, he said, she said type recording in the minutes.
But in the past couple of sessions, it's basically been presentations by facet. So definitely, that's going to be recorded on something else. But going forward, when we get back to normal business, after the 10-year comp plan update is done, it's going to be basically us, discussing whatever is on the agenda. That's all I was pointing out. It is not a criticism. It's just,
Can I get any comment on July 15th first? Can I get a motion to approve July 15th minutes?
I make a motion to approve the July 15th minutes.
Commissioner Fatisi first to approve. Need a second?
A second.
Commissioner Jasper, second. All those in favor of approving July 15th minutes as written, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Say nay. Okay. July 15th is good. General public comments. Please keep comments to 3 minutes or less because state law prohibits the use of city facilities for the purpose of supporting or opposing a campaign or ballot proposition. We respectfully request that public comment not make reference to such matters. Written comments will be accepted by letter or via email to nmcgowan@sedro-woolley.gov. Attention, public comment until 4:30 p.m. the day before the meeting. Do we have any general public comments?
Staff did not receive any written public comments.
Okay. If there are no general public comments, that was at 6:36. We'll be closed at 6:36. Public hearing won't happen. Unfinished business, comprehensive plan, chapter 3, housing element strategies.
Hey, Nicole, just before we start, do you want to introduce your new intern?
Oh, I'd be happy to. Is this on? Can you hear me over there? Okay, perfect. Well, to introduce Ian, this is our planning intern. He's been with us since June of 2025 and helping us immensely with the housing element update primarily and other elements of the comprehensive plan. So,
Welcome.
Welcome.
and he will be participating in the slideshow. So, give him some grace. It's his first planning commission presentation. Okay, I might scoot this back so I can look at the slides. Hopefully not destroy. Okay, so planning staff here have put together this presentation, trying to guide our discussion for the housing target strategies for the 2025 comprehensive plan update. So I welcome you to stop us at any time during the presentation to ask clarifying questions. I want you to keep it just to clarifying questions because we've put together a facilitation to kind of guide the discussion. So if there's at any point that you're confused about one of the slides, let me know. Happy to stop and explain further. So as far as the overview for tonight, so we're going to give you a refresher on the state mandated housing targets by income band or area median income. We'll give you an overview in depth of the proposed housing policy strategies that we're looking at. for potential inclusion in the comprehensive plan and the development regulations following them. And then we'll do our facilitation to hopefully guide us in a direction as far as a staff recommendation to first Planning Commission and then to Council. So for our refresher, the area median income is that midpoint income for a specific geographic area. Half of the households in the region earn more than the median and half earn less. So Sedro-Woolley's area median income is at that 102,000 annual income. So I've broken out the income brackets here, the 0 to 30, 30 to 50, 50 to 80, 80 to 100, and beyond, and shown you kind of what the annual income is for each of those brackets, and some example job types for each of those. And you'll see that all of these all of these ranges, per se, are folks that are within our community and they are integral in keeping the city running, even that 0 to 30%. So breaking this out into our kind of, what do you call this, like the capacity by AMI. So the table above here, it shows you what the surplus versus the deficit is for Sedro-Woolley in each of these. And these were done as part of the housing allocations and growth projections done for the 2025 comprehensive plan update. So you can see we have quite the surplus in the 80 to 120% range, and that can be attributed to the massive amount of single-family housing that has been going on in the city. And then we do have deficits in those under 80% AMI, with the strongest deficit in the 0 to 30%. So I've included some housing types to kind of show you generally what kinds of housing types would serve those income brackets. The 0 to 30% is going to be primarily subsidized or supportive housing, transitional tiny homes like Family Promises Project, and then other sorts of things, older multifamily rentals, shared rooms or roommate situations, co-housing type of things. And then kind of scale up into your middle housing types, duplex, triplex, townhomes, all of that for the kind of 30 to 80%. Then you start getting into more conventional single family residences, and the highest income, you're talking about your custom or luxury single family homes. We don't have a whole lot of that, thankfully.
The AMI, sorry, I probably missed it. Was that for the city or for the county?
These numbers are for the city of Sedro-Woolley.
It's all just for the city? Okay,
Yes.
sorry about that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Can we please speak into the mic? Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions before I move on from this slide?
Yeah, I have one. The housing need for the 0 to 30% income band, the 741, is that number from the like census or taxes, or how are you getting that number?
So those numbers are kind of from the housing needs assessment, where we kind of identify what the vacant properties versus underdeveloped properties, and taking a look at what the zoning code allows as far as development of housing that serves this income bracket. As far as the population projection and coupling that with the anticipated capacity that we have under the current code regulations, that is how that number is achieved. So,
Okay.
does that make sense?
Kind of.
Yeah,
Almost need
kinda.
another slide on explaining how you get to the numbers.
Okay.
So looking at that 741, there's that many spots available? Is that what you've identified?
741 is the number of units at 0 to 30% AMI that is needed to house the folks that will be living here over the next 20 years. The capacity that we have now is 88. very low in comparison to what we need. So we have a deficit of 653.
And there's space in the city for that somewhere?
That's what we'll get to. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna move on. So Sedro-Woolley has a choice. There is no single policy that will sustainably provide all of the housing deficit and all of the income bands. There are many options, but we don't need to select all of them. But again, not one choice is going to get us there. So things to keep in mind as far as the options that we'll go over today. So rezones do make sweeping changes, but they often do miss parts of those lower incomes that we're trying to hit. Multifamily tax exemptions, they do address the lowest incomes, but there may be temporary burdens on the city and potential for burdens on our higher income households. Middle housing preserves the neighborhood character, but may miss part of lower incomes as well. Reserving affordable housing units may cause developers to shift the cost of that lost profit onto the market rate housing. So possibility for raising rents for market rate housing. There's all trade-offs to consider with every option. And they're listed out here. It's quite the list, and we'll go through all of those. Okay, so just want to touch base on the 0 to 30% AMI. And Ian, feel free to jump in because you worked so very hard on this. So there's no single policy that will sustain affordability at the 0 to 30% AMI range at scale. That level of affordability, it does require creative solutions that reinforce each other. But closing that shortfall is possible. So while there are substantial obstacles to doing this, we can overcome them if we fully commit. City of Sedro-Woolley does have a responsibility to its residents to try to best create a housing needs or housing affordable to every income band, not just a select few. So ways we can get there, there's partnerships with nonprofits, that's gonna be the big one. So using grants, for example, to purchase land to be publicly owned, and then leasing that land to nonprofits or developers that provide affordable housing. We can subsidize ADUs that allow those elderly residents to age in place, and that would also serve those 0 to 30% households. The grants can be used to replace revenue lost from waiving impact fees or sewer connection fees for that 0 to 30% AMI housing construction. Co-housing is kind of an intentional, self-governing, cooperative community where residents live in private homes or private sleeping facilities. You can kind of think of it as how a dorm is set up, where you have your private sleeping facility and you share your kitchen, share common space, share the bathroom, something like that. So the neighbors in these kinds of developments, they collaboratively plan and manage the community activities and the shared spaces while they maintain their own income and their private lives. So that sort of a development does cut down on costs, and leasing publicly owned land for development of this type of housing would be a great way of getting to that 0 to 30% AMI household. It also instills kind of a sense of integrity and pride in where they live, helps them feel a part of a broader community. Smaller minimum unit sizes, things like tiny homes and maybe branching up to cottage housing, ADUs, square footage does have a strong correlation to housing costs. The smaller the unit size, the less it'll cost to build. Prefabricated and manufactured housing, mobile homes kind of fall into that category too. Smaller unit sizes, again, manufactured housing at the smaller unit size is way less costly to build. There are cooperatively owned mobile home parks, also known as resident-owned communities. So House Bill 1191 allows mobile homes to be considered real property for the purposes of securing mortgages if the unit is cooperatively owned in a park. In addition to cost, saving inherent to the business model by excluding the profit motive. Having the access to traditional funding sources only increases the number of low-income earners who can secure affordable housing without relying on government subsidy. And for that reason, the cooperatively owned mobile home parks should be encouraged and incentivized to the greatest possible extent. The city should consider leasing publicly owned property to cooperatively owned parks or those managed by nonprofits to maximize the potential benefits. My understanding of the cooperatively owned mobile home parks is they will kind of, it's similar in function to an HOA where they pay maintenance fees for any shared space within the mobile home community. So things like their access drives or landscaping or other kinds of common amenities, they will all kind of share into the maintenance of that. And then they have access to loans for the mortgage of their mobile home. Inclusionary zoning. So inclusionary zoning does require a certain percentage of the units in a new housing development to be reserved for a certain AMI range. And that's kind of set by the city and targeted at where the most deficit is at. So providing this tied to a certain incentive, it has to be tied to a certain incentive, enables the developer to still get a return on investment. So some examples, you might want to scale that. So a small amount of units required to be reserved for 30% AMI and below, or a moderate amount of units at 50% AMI below, or a relatively large amount of units at 80% AMI and below, and then you exchange that for a density bonus or impact fee reduction, something like that. Los Angeles has a program like this. So as of February 2020, half of the affordable units planned through the program are affordable at 30% AMI. Minneapolis has a policy that requires owners of rental housing projects that meet certain criteria to accept tenant-based rental housing assistance, so namely Section 8 housing choice vouchers. And in doing so, the owners still receive the fair market rent for units rented to voucher holders. In Montgomery County, their inclusionary ordinance grants a right to purchase 1/3 of all inclusionary units to the local public housing authority. And developers are required to offer a 21-day period for the housing authority to purchase those new units before they begin offering them to homeowners. And Montgomery County has been able to serve a much higher share of low and very low income residents than is typical for other inclusionary housing programs across the country this way. Other things, so further investment into the public housing authority. According to the housing authority, here, there are 77% of the current residents housed in properties owned by our housing authority that are at or below 30% AMI. Preserving and creating affordable housing through funding repairs and renovations to existing structures prevents loss of existing affordable housing, creating a stable revenue stream for investors for new projects as well. All things that the Public Housing Authority has the ability to fund. And lastly, they're reducing parking minimums. That's arguably one of the most effective ways of reducing the cost of construction. It's a good way of offsetting loss in revenue for the developer, providing units at under 30% AMI. Any questions on this slide? I know that was a lot.
You know, a lot of the stuff that we already have in code, but I'm also seeing like 1191. These are urban issues. I get they affect everyone, but this is a really small little town, even population-wise, in 20 years. So having the ability to incorporate a lot of government-mandated programs, well, you're going to need money for this. So it's great to put it up there on a screen, but the practicality of it to say, okay, well, what happens when that person or those individuals go now above the AMI? Who's policing that, right?
Yep, and that's something we'll get to at the facilitation, so.
Do we eject them after that? It's like,
Let's keep it to clarifying questions at this stage, right? Let's get through the presentation.
I apologize.
No problem. Okay. So, moving into our rezone options. So, rezone option 1, this is on the John Liner corridor. So, Public Works Department, they have been successful in securing the funding for the extension between John Liner and Jones Road and John Liner, yeah. So, the improvements included in that project are widening the road to mitigate for the congestion. This will essentially function as a new arterial in the city, so definitely something to consider when they were designing this. Improving connectivity, again, the arterial, intended to get some traffic off of Highway 20 through the city. Adding a sidewalk, they're adding a shared use path, street lights, and more. So all of these improvements, they do increase the street network capacity of this area to support more dwelling units than the current zoning does allow. The benefit to this rezone is it does not create any nonconformities. It's conducive to infill, and it directs growth to the north, as is already in our comprehensive plan. But this option, as you can see from kind of the playing around with the toolkit there, it does not do much in the way of closing our shortfalls in housing capacity on its own. Okay, moving to the R10 North. So the residential 10 zone would be a new zone that we're proposing that would allow single-family residences with ADUs, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, townhomes, and cottage clusters. It's intended to be kind of a middle ground between the R7 and the R15 zones, primarily focused at providing that middle housing at the 50 to 100% AMI range. Reason for choosing this area just north of Cascade Trail is excuse me, it's a reasonable area for transition to higher density near adjacent R7 and R15 zoning, as well as mixed commercial and the central business district zones. Many of the original 40 by 120 lots, 4,800 square feet, are located in this area. Those lots are still recognized by the city of Sedro-Woolley and are a historical example of compact development that already exists. This area is close to downtown and the Cascade Trail, which promotes walkability and reduces vehicle dependency. The problem with this option is the area is already mostly developed, so new rate of construction will probably be quite low. And we've projected a pretty limited impact on the affordable units it would provide at the below 80% AMI. Okay. So rezone option 3, bridging the gap. That's what I like to call this one. So there's this area just also north of the Cascade Trail, but there's this kind of gap in the R15 zoning that's out there that's R7. So this would be changing that R7 to R15, creating a consistent zoning pattern between those two adjacent R15 areas. Also does not create nonconformities. The development already existing under the R7 code is allowed under R15. We have existing street and utility capacity here, so that means more where infill will be much more achievable financially here. Again, we're close to Cascade Trail and nearby goods and services in this area, so walkability is maximized and dependency on vehicles for transportation is reduced. A little bit more in the 0 to 30 here, 1. But again, not much there. Okay, so then this R10 South rezone option is kind of the sister to option 2, R10 North. This area is focused on the area south of Northern Avenue or Cascade Trail. So again, this rezone from R7 to R10 creates a nice transition in the urban form between the downtown and R15 zoning that's adjacent. It's an ideal location for middle housing. Again, many of the small 40 by 120 lots are here and exhibit compact development that's been here for ages. The walkability and reduction in vehicle miles traveled is a big benefit. But again, similar to the situation with the R10 North rezone, most of the lots are already developed, so there's low potential for production of new units here anytime soon. Okay. This is rezone number 5. This is connecting the high school to downtown. So the benefits of this one, so street and utility networks already exist here and provide capacity for infill development. The housing would be and is located near schools and job centers, central to town, so reducing dependency on vehicles, saving transportation costs of working families. The Central Business District has strict design standards in place already intended to preserve neighborhood character. The Central Business District also already has reduced parking standards due to the proximity of goods and services in the area, so it's easier to get affordable housing projects to pencil because of the reduced parking minimums here. The Central Business District zoning code in this area also allows, it allows for 4 units in a standalone residential building in this area.
This would be expanding CBD or?
Expanding the CBD, yes.
Slightly.
Yeah. So the problem with this option is that it will create nonconformities. So any existing residential development that's under 4 units per building would be considered a legal nonconforming structure. And as a reminder for those, that designation does make it difficult for the resale of those homes. Banks don't like giving loans out if they don't have the assurance that the structure can be rebuilt if it's completely destroyed. Also, a property owner that has a non-conforming structure is limited to only repairs and maintenance projects on the home. So they would need to undergo a conditional use permitting process to do any kind of substantial improvements like additions, for example. Any addition in floor area, you're required to get a conditional use permit. Once again, this area only has a few vacant lots, so significant change would not be seen for years. Okay. And here is the multifamily tax exemption program. So this program is a property tax waiver program under which the city would adopt an ordinance for one of the 3 types of programs. So you'll see here there's 3 types, the 8-year, the 12-year, and the 20-year. And I put a fun little gold star next to the 20-year one because that one would be the best at achieving the 0 to 30% AMI range for us. The 8-year would not be as beneficial to us. There's not an affordable housing requirement tied to it. So it's used to spur market rate multifamily construction where it's needed. A lot of jurisdictions will use this if there's kind of like a, I hate to use the word, but like a slum neighborhood that they want to fix up. So it spurs new development that way. The 12-year program gets at that 80 to 115% AMI households, so better. It's best for providing affordable rental units. 20% of the units in development that's at least 4 units in size would be required to be reserved for that income range. And then the 20-year program is 25% of the units in a residential development that is at least 4 units in size. They would need to reserve those for 80% AMI or under. So essentially how this works, it's a property tax waiver program, right? So the city provides the financial incentive for the new construction, conversion, or rehabilitation of multifamily residential improvements. And the city determines which type. The property owner does not have to pay the property taxes on the residential improvements of the project for the given number of years that the city has chosen. Some things to consider with the MFTE program is it does temporarily result in a loss in tax revenue for that period of time that the property owner is not paying property tax to the city. Something that did come up when the Department of Commerce came to give a presentation on, it was an informative presentation on the multifamily tax exemption program. The city council did give us some concerns on whether there would be a tax shift on the rest of the community. And we did get a chance to kind of discuss that with our finance director. And kind of the consensus there is that the tax shift does not increase taxes for other property owners. It just reduces the total tax revenue that the city has at its discretion. So, yeah, other things to consider for us is that it does take staff time to track progress and monitor whether the developers are doing everything in accordance with the agreement and the ordinance. And we would have to do regular program updates just to ensure that we're still providing maximum benefits under the program. Okay. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I do. Property taxes are composed of a lot of different components. It's not just what goes to the city of Sedro-Woolley. We got the school district, we got police, fire, we got other things that people vote on. Are we saying specifically that all property taxes would be eliminated? In essence, that the school district, all of a sudden, we're putting in multifamily housing, and you can all of a sudden, the schools can now get, an extra couple hundred, or Pat would probably have a better idea than I would on this, of an influx of new students, but that all needs to be financed.
My understanding of the program is that the temporary waiver would only be for the residential portion
Okay.
of the development.
Not the other pieces that are essential to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, I'm going to pass it off to Ian. He's going to start covering the next few slides.
Hello. So, here we have a couple of, potential sites for the MFTE. And I also just want to clarify that for the projected impact on the shortfalls, that's assuming the 20-year exemption. So, beginning here with the UVMU, it's already a site that supports high-density multifamily housing. And it's in close proximity to transit services, close to downtown as well. But I also really want to point out that this has the potential to create 74 units at that 0 to 30% AMI range, which would almost double the city's existing capacity. So that is a huge opportunity to create housing affordable to households with extremely low incomes. Now, along Hodgin Street, Trail Road, and State Route 20, multifamily residential is allowed above commercial space, whereas everywhere else on the site, it is allowed standalone. It's a great opportunity to create mixed income or a mixed income community. The largest concern would be that because of the size of the site, there would also be a larger decrease in tax revenue for the city. Now, the second site is Hometown Pharmacy, which also is in close proximity to transit. There is essential services located nearby within walking distance as well, which lend it to being a good site for future development. It has the potential to strengthen the relationship between the Upper Skagit tribe and the city. Again, this is a only one parcel, so the decrease to the tax revenue would be less considerable than the UVMU. And the site already supports compact development because it is zoned as mixed commercial, so there would be limited additional impact to neighbors. But the concern here is that being close to Cook Road and State Route 20, those are already prone to congestion, so that would be something that would have to be taken into consideration.
I got a question. In that third column, change from existing, how come on the, like, we have a 256 surplus, but we're adding, you can add 11 more. Why would you even want to do that? Why wouldn't you just make more of the ones that we need? Unless I'm understanding that column wrong.
No, I believe you're understanding it correctly. So cost-burdened households, which are those that spend more than 30% of their income on housing costs, doesn't perfectly correlate to the extremely low or very low income bands. So creating more units that are affordable at all bands has its benefits. Additionally, creating more, well, actually, I think that this might be something that Nicole might be able to answer better.
Can you repeat the question?
Okay, on the third column, it says change from existing, and I've been kind of focusing on that every slide. And I get all excited when I see 0 to 30, you know, a high number there. But when I see 0 to 30, 0, and I see 80 to 100% with a surplus of 256 already, and then change from existing 11 more, is that what we want?
Yeah, so the multifamily tax exemption program, it still accounts for, you know, the standard market rate housing as well. So you're still going to have increases in those types of housing as development occurs in the UVMU. As far as the toolkit and how the assumptions are put into that as far as math goes, I won't be able to speak to that as well. But yeah, generally speaking, it's you're still going to be seeing market rate housing, so you're going to have increases there as that property develops.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Then the third option here is the Benson property, which the zoning is R15, so already supports multifamily. Also close by to goods and services, and also only one parcel, so the loss in revenue would be less considerable. Another thing is that the parcel is currently undeveloped, and the owner has expressed an interest in developing affordable housing there. But the concerns here are that transit is further away, and the residents might be more dependent on their own personal vehicles. All right. So we have had conversations with the Port of Skagit about having workforce housing, senior housing, and residential extended stay housing at the Swift Center, specifically in the core and influence areas, which I believe is everything that isn't the green open space here on the map. The Director of Planning and Development for the port has said that an adequate supply of housing is required to attract and retain a skilled labor force. So this is an opportunity for the city to benefit by creating housing at the, or within the range of 30 to 80% AMI, and then also for the port to benefit because that would attract employers if they know that there's a steady supply of workforce housing where workers could live there. So it is an opportunity for both parties to mutually benefit.
real quick, I want to jump in on that one. So you'll notice it's not included anymore as an MFTE option. It's because in our conversations with the port, they are already exempt from property taxes.
All right. Next up, House Bill 1337 requires cities fully planning under the GMA, which includes Sedro-Woolley, to allow 2 ADUs on every lot that allows single-family residences. Something to point out here is that ADUs can easily blend into the established neighborhood character to the point of being indistinguishable from SFRs, especially if they're attached units. There's a lot of creative design standards and guidelines that can be used here to ensure that the aesthetic character of the neighborhood is consistent, that the ADUs don't change that. They are ideal for aging in place. So for elderly residents who are on a fixed income, they can either supplement their own income by renting out ADUs on their property, or possibly they can have multi-generational living arrangements where they can have families stay in the principal unit, they can go to the ADU. There's a variety of options there. And then also on the next slide, we're going to talk about Senate Bill 5559, which requires cities to include unit lot subdivision provisions in their short plat regulations, which would allow for individual ownership of the ADUs, separate from the ownership of the single-family residence, which basically what this allows here is for individual units in multifamily structures to be owned separately, which creates new opportunities for home ownership and equity. This means that multifamily units don't have to be just rentals. This is also state legislation that has to be included in the update of the comprehensive plan. But this doesn't apply exclusively for ADUs. The diagram here shows townhomes, which would also benefit from having new ownership opportunities being created. Okay, cottage clusters are essentially smaller single-family residences that are oriented around a central common space, typically a lawn. They range from around 400 to 1,200 square feet. They are more affordable because they're smaller than traditional single-family residences. And they also encourage and foster a sense of community because everyone gets to interact with their neighbors more frequently. There's a shared sense of investment because everyone has access to that communal lawn in the center. This would also benefit from 5559, where you'd have opportunities for individual ownership. And again, because they resemble traditional single-family residences, they blend in really well with a lot of the existing character. So it's an opportunity to create middle housing that resembles traditional single-family residences. As far as the concerns, there would need to be some kind of agreement in writing that guarantees that there's long-term affordability that is maintained. As far as fee reductions and waivers to offset the cost of construction, this is an opportunity to use grant funding to replace that lost revenue because it is a one-time cost. There will not be any continued reliance on that funding, and that would allow for the city to not spend any additional money because it would be coming from the provider of the grant, but it would reduce the cost of construction. And then also regarding parking, there could be a singular parking lot on site for everyone to park at. All right, so then also Currently, there is a unit limit for multifamily structures, which we already have a building code, bulk restrictions, and unit or maximum units per acre, which control the scale and the intensity of development. And so the unit limit unnecessarily constrains what kind of housing could be built, especially in areas that are already the best suited for it. It restricts the location of residential units in relation to the street, and for mixed-use developments, it prevents the developer from building enough units to support the commercial space on the ground floor. Then here we have some examples of middle housing types that are currently not legal to be built in 99.6% of Sedro-Woolley. So courtyard apartments, apartments with open space, the row houses, all those currently are unable to be built here. Another option is to allow a height bonus in exchange for permanent affordable housing, which allows for the lost revenue from not providing market rate rents to be made up for by the additional units, which would be market rate. Ultimately, staff would determine an appropriate bonus based off of the criteria, so how many affordable units and at what level of affordability would be provided. And the main point here is that it would allow developers to maintain their bottom line and their profit margin. Then for the PRD additional unit bonus, very similar to the height bonus, except it allows for the developers of the PRD to construct additional units for providing permanent affordable housing. Again, it would promote a mixed income development, so it is inclusive, which proactively deters gentrification. PRD is already common in Sedro-Woolley, so it will not heavily impact neighborhood character. However, it also does little to support the lowest income bands. All right. Yes.
Speaking of PRDs, I think, Tom, did you send us something that said there's going to be a hearing on a PRD on Reed? Or that way?
That was, my weekly update, I mentioned that there was going to be
Yeah, it said Monday, October 22nd. Is that?
Tomorrow's the 22nd.
It was
last Monday.
Oh, it was last Monday.
Yeah, 2 days. Or, no, wait, sorry.
Tomorrow's the 22nd.
Wednesday, yesterday.
It was yesterday already?
That would have been the 20th.
Okay. That was a hearing for a PRD.
That's correct, yes.
So when do we find out if that?
Hearing examiner has 10 days to render a decision.
November 3rd. Yeah.
What was some of the primary, was it an addition for more density? Why was there a hearing to begin with?
Planned residential developments are all done under the conditional use permitting process.
Okay,
So
So it all has to
inherently,
go to
it's
hearing.
approved by a hearing examiner.
Okay, I will finish up the rest of the slides here. So Nicole mentioned earlier that we need to be creative when we're thinking about how we're going to address the 0 to 30% AMI. So we as staff have thought about taking a new approach to how we regulate just the built environment in general in Sedro-Woolley. Right now, we use dwelling units per acre, and that can be really restrictive, especially in our R5 and R7 zones. And a way to regulate the built environment without restricting dwelling units per acre is through a floor area ratio. So the floor area ratio is the total gross floor area of the structure divided by the total lot area. So a smaller FAR like 0.5 would get you a low intensity FAR, where a higher ratio such as 2.0 would get you a higher intensity FAR. And so those lower FARs can still preserve, neighborhood character, can still regulate open space, they can still, and provide flexibility in the design and number of units in a lot, while still making sure we don't have towering buildings in where the R5 zone is now. And so using an FAR in combination with lot coverage maximums, bulk restrictions, design standards, will allow developers to be able to come up with creative solutions to provide more dwelling units while still maintaining what we're looking for in those neighborhood characters in those lower intensity areas. Another option we have is to take a look at our fees and how, just another way of interpreting density, assuming we don't adopt the FAR. So we could either divide all of the dwelling units into two. It could be a smaller unit and a larger unit. Units under 799 square feet would count as half, both for impact fees, connection fees, density calculations. So there would need to be some code updates with our minimum lot sizes if we pursue this route. But those reduced fees and the reduced lot sizes can bring down the costs and increase land capacity, which would in turn ideally create more affordable housing in the city. The other option would be to look at a more scaled approach. That way, if your square footage of your house is right at the threshold, your fee and your density calculation is more proportional to what you're actually building. So we have a model here that has 4 different options. Under 400 square feet is 30%, 400 to 800 is half, 800, 1200 is 70%, and what we charge now for a single family house would be 1200 feet or larger. Yeah. So I mentioned on the last slide, reducing minimum lot sizes would probably need to be considered if we redo how we calculate density in our residential zones. So if we reduce the lot sizes, and I've provided a table here that equates what a minimum lot size would be for the dwelling units per acre. So for example, in our R7 zone, the minimum lot size right now is 6,000 square feet. If we reduce those, if we reduce the lot sizes, especially when they are closer to the urban core, like in the example, then they are usually more conducive to infill because you just simply have more land available to subdivide. And if we reduce the minimum lot sizes, we would still have other options to regulate housing, such as lot coverage and design standards and height restrictions. So you will also notice on this slide, we don't have a table modeling the impact to the income bands. We felt that there was something wrong with that model because all we got were zeros, so we're not sure what the impact would be on the income band for this. Another option would be to reduce the parking restrictions for affordable housing units. So parking lots, our developers have expressed that parking lots eat up a significant amount of the cost of construction. And in Sedro-Woolley, most people don't pay to park, so the parking lot is not paying for itself. The building next door is paying for the parking lot. So reducing the required amount of parking for those lower income bands would increase the buildable area of that lot. And the lowest income bands are the least likely to own a vehicle, so we would see the impact would not be as great as if we were just doing an overall reduction to parking. An important thing to note, though, for this is Sedro-Woolley is still highly vehicle-centric, so this reduction would need to be strategically applied to certain geographic areas. They need to be close to services, close to food, close to transit, close to the hospital. So we would really need to think about that location if we decided to implement this. We've also, in our research, we found that several studies do defend that this is one of the most significant ways, or one of the ways that shows the greatest rate of success for affordable housing developments to pencil, because that parking just takes up so much land that could be used for housing. Another option that we have in our tool belt is to allow middle housing by right in our residential zones. So as a refresher, middle housing are all the plexes, the duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, cottage clusters, townhouses, and row houses, and courtyard apartments. Currently, we allow some of these in our R15, our CBD fringe, and our UVMU fringe zones. When I say fringe, I mean not on the main street. So in the CBD, those are Metcalf and Ferry. In UVMU, it's Trail Road and the highway. We do allow some of our some forms of middle housing in the lower density zones, like we allow duplexes in the R7 zone. However, on a later slide, I will touch on those because the restrictions for those types of housing can be really arduous. Lastly, I just want to note that there is zero change in all of the AMIs where we have a deficit, so keep that in mind when considering this. Currently, right now, our code prohibits single-wide manufactured homes on residential lots, but we do allow double-wide manufactured homes. It's a little difficult when you're looking at these pictures to really spot the difference. If you were driving by on the street and you glanced out your window for a half second, you probably wouldn't be able to tell if it was a single-wide or a double-wide. Currently, right now, we have 4 mobile home parks in the city. Every year, we do a census for how many vacancies we have. 2024, we found 1 vacant lot in all of our mobile home parks. There are at least a couple hundred spaces in Sedro-Woolley, and they were all taken up except for 1. Some benefits to this is it would be a really simple code update. It would almost be just adding 1 sentence to all of our residential zoning regulations. Allowing this wouldn't require any subsidies from the city, and it can secure long-lasting home ownership. It is pretty difficult to model the demand between a single wide and a double wide. However, in the table in the top right, it does show some improvement in our 30 to 50% income band, so it is definitely worth considering. I also want to note, you'll often see mobile homes notated as a NOAA, which is an acronym for Naturally Occurring Affordable Housing. So this is something that everybody in our region is considering as well. This one touches on some of the heavy restrictions that we have in the city. So on the left, I'll touch duplexes first. So in the R7 zone, for example, we do allow duplexes. However, the minimum lot size must be 1.5 times larger than a house. It must have twice the width of a house that would contain a single-family residence. It must have a minimum depth of 100 feet. We don't require any depth for houses. And we only allow 1 duplex allowed per 3 successive lots. So if you have 4 lots on the same block, if you add a 4th duplex to that same block in the city, we're going to deny it. And so I had a question I wanted to ask you guys, if you just want to silently think to yourself about that, is are these restrictions really necessary for duplexes if we have design standards, if we have bulk standards, if we have FAR and weather protection and parking standards and all the other stuff that we talk about here? Do we really need all those additional restrictions on duplexes? And I provided a table here that shows kind of the decline in duplex permits that we've been issuing. In 2021, it was by far the busiest year in our department. We issued more permits than ever before. But we are declining in what we're seeing for duplex permits issued. We've issued only 1 this year in 2025. I didn't include it in the table because 2025 isn't over yet. But that changes. That number doesn't look like it's changing this year.
How does that compare to regular permits for single-family homes? Are you seeing a decline there too, or is it just for duplexes?
Yeah, we are. I wouldn't say the decline is this great. Compared to 2021, there is a decline in single-family homes too. And then Nicole also, I think it was Nicole, it might have been Ian, we touched on non-conforming single-family houses. If we were to do a rezone in the central business district, that would make those single-family homes non-conforming. One option, our neighbors do this, City of Burlington and City of Mount Vernon do this. They allow incidental modifications to non-conforming single-family homes so that you can do a minor remodel or you add a bathroom to your house. We do allow that, or in the event of a fire and you lose your house, you can rebuild it. And that's really what the banks want to see when they are issuing those mortgage loans. So that can stabilize the market in those zones like the Central Business District or all the houses we have on Highway 20 that are non-conforming right now. It also will just give the property owners the peace of mind that the city will allow them to live there. We don't want to push them out of their house just because they're in a non-conforming zone.
Hey, Ashton?
Yeah.
Isn't there a couple duplexes being built as we speak between F&S Grade and Jones Road right now?
Yes. So we issued those 2 earlier this year.
So that would have been 2025?
Yes.
Okay, because they leveled that about 5 years ago or 6 years ago, and they're just now building. So I didn't know if it was on your list there for 21 or 2.
It was not. It was not on there. But I do know what project you're referring to. It would be under the 25 numbers. So I touched earlier on the permitting a middle housing by right. One slightly more strong version of that would be to allow all housing by right. This would be kind of stepping back from the Euclidean zoning where we regulate uses, residential uses strictly in the residential zone. And then we would essentially allow any type of housing to be built anywhere so long as they conformed to our floor area ratio standards, our design standards, our lot coverage requirements, parking. All of that stuff would still be required. It's just you could build a townhouse in the R5 zone as long as you have the low FAR that we're requiring. Or you can build transitional housing in the R7 zone as long as you have sufficient parking. One concern about this shift, it would be a very big shift, a very large code update, lots of change for how we process permits in-house, including removing the land use permitting requirement for all of our housing types. We wouldn't see a land use permit for ADUs anymore. We wouldn't see CUPs for townhomes anymore, or transitional housing, anything like that anymore. So this would be a big change, but it would likely address those lower income bands. We just haven't modeled it.
So just a comment here. So other jurisdictions, you can have it both ways, okay? You can have a floor area ratio calculation in one particular zone for a real lot of practical reasons versus single family and everything else in between outside of that. So a lot of the things that I've seen on these slides, we already have in place, okay, including ADUs. But I will tell you firsthand, and we have somebody here that's an expert as well, the demand for the ADUs has not been that fantastic. As a matter of fact, BYK, I was talking to Paul Woodmansey, it's a great option that they have on all their new houses. A lot of people aren't taking them up on that because it's expensive. Okay, just to even do an ADU on a practical basis, you still need your sanitation. You still need a whole bunch of different things that even if it's 800 square feet, you can be looking at $120,000, $80,000 on the low end, okay, to implement that style of housing. So it's not just the fact of, okay, you permit it, okay, is it affordable and does it make sense that it pencils out? So there's a lot of other things here outside of the zoning that, okay, go ahead and do it, but it still needs to make sense from an economic standpoint, and that's all I'm bringing out.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Don't forget it. Make sure to write it down in your flip sheet so we can circle back to it in the facilitation.
I live in this world. It's good.
I have two questions for you before you move on. So the last 7 options we looked at, those are all if we worked under the FAR, the floor area ratio.
For this, the
Yeah,
last slide?
all the stuff you've been presenting, basically, since you started presenting, is options under FAR.
Most of them are. Some of the options I presented wouldn't be able to be done under the FAR, such as reconsidering how we calculate density.
All right.
That scaled approach to density calculations is mutually exclusive to implementing FAR.
Okay, that's why I was asking, because I thought they were, and then some of them were like, and then my other question was, and I'm not putting it down, but I know Bellingham uses FAR, but when we tried to use it out at Urban Village Mixed Use out there, we tried it as a thing, and nobody could understand it well enough to make it work. Not John kind of had a basic understanding, John Coleman, but we couldn't make it work, and just said, let's do it the way we've been doing it. It's incredibly complicated.
I'm hoping
system.
it's more common now, and those tricky parts of it have been fleshed out by the larger cities.
Yeah, and again, I'm not talking against it. I'm just saying that our experience with it was not.
Okay, my slides are wrapping up here. We're almost done. This slide touches on the pre-approvals. We have a couple different options for how we could implement a pre-approval. The first one would be for ADUs and later on cottages if cottage clusters are adopted. We would have pre-designed ADUs on file with the city. A homeowner could come into the city, pick one, and essentially they would only have to pay the cost of construction and any necessary impact fees. The design review fees as well as the plan review fees would already be taken care of. No need to pay those. Yes.
Wouldn't you say plus utilities?
Yes, monthly utilities you'd still have to pay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's expensive.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the utilities is part of those impact fees, and we do have reduced impact fees for ADUs, but it would be something to keep in mind as well. We also are considering shadow platting. We've garnered some interest from the community for shadow platting. It can sort of be thought of as a pre-approval for a subdivision. Essentially, a landowner can subdivide their property below the state's minimum density, so long as on the documentation for the plat they designate that they have capacity in the future for additional lots to satisfy the minimum required density, and that those lots have the proper infrastructure and utilities to be serviced.
Is that one still tabled?
As of now, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and now I have some non-tax financial mechanisms that I'd like you to consider. So our largest deficit is the 0 to 30% AMI. That's the most difficult to accommodate in our development regulations, in our zoning code. So these non-tax financial mechanisms are going to be critical to getting that 0 to 30% deficit. So the first one presented is an affordable housing or fee in lieu. A developer would be required to provide affordable housing units or required to pay into an affordable housing fund that the council would control expenditures from. Planning staff, the planning department strongly recommends, if this is implemented, that the projects that council funds be restricted to 0 to 30% AMI, since that is where we have the largest deficit in. We believe that we can close the deficit in the other income bands through our development regulations. It's the 0 to 30% AMI that we really need to be coming up with some creative solutions. There's also grants out there. The CHIP grant is issued from the state. The state would reimburse the developer for any sort of impact fees or sewer connection fees. However, the city would apply on behalf of the developer. City kind of acts as a middleman for that process. There's also the Community Development Block Grant, or the CDBG. That's a very broad grant. It's focused on economic development, public improvements, infrastructure improvements. It's very versatile. And part of that CDBG grant, it would be Section 108 loan guarantee. So that's a loan guarantee that guarantees the recipient of a CDBG funding can access loans to purchase or rehabilitate the house that they're in. So it's kind of like a two-piece step for affordable housing between those two grants. Another one on there is the Home Investment Partnership Program. That's through the Department of, it's through HUD, Housing and Urban Development. Section 108, the Home Investment Funding is a grant to local governments to provide assistance to our citizens, our residents, in purchasing and rehabilitating non-luxury homes. So we are awarded the money and we distribute it to the residents within the city who apply for that grant. And I just want to, the Home Investment Partnerships Program caught my eye because Skagit County gets about $1 million in that grant money every year, and Department of Commerce gets like over $10 million in that grant funding every year. So it seems to be pretty lucrative. Another option that we have would be impact or connection fee waiver. We could waive the fees for impacts and utility connections for housing below 30% AMI. We could also implement a scaled reduction, sort of tying back to what I presented earlier with that density calculation impact fee reduction. However, there would be a concern that this doesn't get to a city council's point that development needs to pay for itself. We would be waiving the cost of development for developers. Lastly, there's an option to lease publicly owned land. There are a few parcels owned by the city that can be leased to nonprofits or affordable housing developers to construct 0 to 30% AMI housing. However, there is a lot that goes into leasing, development agreements, and retaining permanent affordable housing. So we're talking about staff time, review from our legal department, which would increase costs by the city. So it would be a big overtaking for us to consider. So we threw a bunch of options out at you. There's a lot to consider here. I just want you to reflect on a couple of things on why we are struggling so hard to meet the housing targets here in the city. So there are a wide range of values held among the decision makers here on the commission, as well as at city council and the public, who are ultimately the decision makers for the city. We have to balance the demands of the public interest between what developers need, what the public needs for housing, how our infrastructure can serve everybody in the city. Housing is also a wicked problem. There's not one solution that we can just magically come up with and everybody has a house all of a sudden. Housing also typically is one of the largest methods to generate generational wealth. If somebody in your family didn't own housing before you, there's a good chance that you're going to struggle to pay the cost of housing in the future. And then we don't know all of the consequences for implementing these. There are plenty of unintended consequences that we just don't have the foresight to think of right now while we're coming up with these policies. So it will need to change and revise as we move along. So with that, at this point, don't ask any questions. I'm going to transfer over to Nicole so we can do the facilitation. Yeah, and hopefully we'll get some direction.
Okay. I feel like I'm the fun police today. Okay, so we're gonna start a facilitation. So the purpose of doing this is for you guys to help us figure out what combination of housing strategies you feel we should pursue in our comp plan and our development regulations. So the goal isn't to reach a perfect consensus, but we want to surface a set of strategies that the Planning Commission supports moving forward now. We're on a time crunch. So we'll be using a structured process. It's called the Discovery and Action Dialogue, also known as DADS. And here's how it's gonna work. So each of you has a flip sheet of the strategies we went over tonight in front of you. You have scratch paper, a pen, and a stack of sticky notes. Let me know if any of those materials aren't in front of you right now. They should be.
Sticky notes? Oh. Oh, thanks.
Okay, good. Okay, so we're gonna ask you 7 guiding questions. For each question, you'll have 2 minutes of silent reflection. Tom is gonna be our time management person tonight, to jot down your thoughts on your piece of scratch paper. Then we'll spend 5 minutes sharing in the group so everyone can hear different perspectives. We are going to capture all of your input on our own flip sheet, and at the end, we will harvest all of your input and use the flip sheet of strategies and your sticky notes. Using the flip sheet of strategies and your sticky notes, you will have a chance to prioritize or indicate which combinations of strategies you support. And we'll provide you further direction for each step in the facilitation, so don't freak out if none of that makes sense right now. Do we have any quick questions before we start?
So we can put the notes directly on this flip sheet. I don't
You can
need
do whatever the
multiple.
heck you want.
Okay.
Scribble all over it, I don't care.
That's fine.
But try to follow the directions, though. So, yeah.
Hey, Nicole,
Yeah.
one quick question. I might have missed this somewhere along the way, but is there a targeted goal for the 0 to 30% AMI in monthly output, like rent or cost of housing, or is there a goal?
For monthly rent,
Like, what's affordable?
what's affordable? Oh, man.
I mean, what's our goal here? What's our target?
Let's go back. This monthly. We had a lot of slides.
Well, you said 30% of income, so you're looking at what? 900 a month?
Yeah, $0 to $30,000 a year.
So the annual income, I guess you could just take that and divide it by 12. Right there. So if 30,600 is your annual income, or dividing that by 12.
Okay.
And then
good.
take 30% of that?
Well,
Okay.
if it's 0 to 30, if you take the average, it's 15, right? Is that what we're? Rent? Yeah. 30 or less, because it's Someone who makes nothing.
So also a question that as we go through this, we have to make the assumption this is going to be totally federally or state financed, because anyone making only $30,000 a year, okay, is not even working in Starbucks. So there is no way that I can come up with any number here that's economically feasible for anybody without knowing that it's going to be subsidized by at least 60% of what's even there. So when I make these notes, I'm going to make the assumption that that particular aspect that we're looking at here is going to be financed by some government agency.
I
Okay.
think that would be
Yeah, that would be
appropriate to
appropriate, yeah.
assume, yeah. And taking it back to the end, please hold it.
Tommy, you going to say start?
No, not yet. Okay. Okay. So. Again, taking 2 minutes for silent reflection time, no discussion. I don't want to hear Pete. Tom is going to start the clock. Question 1, what stands out to you after hearing about these housing strategies? Write it on your scratch piece of paper.
I'll put it on here.
Blank page, scribble on it, yeah. I found a friend in the audience. The monthly rent for 0 to 30% AMI roughly comes out to about $765 a month.
Yeah, that's what I got too.
65.
765, yeah. That would be the monthly rent that low income could afford.
Okay. I'll wait for you to finish your thought.
I want you to see this.
Okay, I've got my designated staff note takers here as I'm guiding this facilitation, so please take good notes. For the next 5 minutes, I'd like you to openly discuss. So, just like you would at a normal planning commission meeting amongst yourselves.
Who would like to start?
I'll
Stands out
start.
to you.
Of course. Well, I've been here quite some time. So this question 1, what stands out? And I'm just going to read to you what I put down here. We've already been involved with extensive multi-year analysis and discussion of all the materials that have been presented here. So in essence, this is really nothing new of what we've had now. I'm here since 2013. So we've had a lot of different changes, and we've modified things to adopt to what the last 10-year comp plan was, where we had a much higher population projection than we do now. So the only thing that's new now is this accommodation via the state of the 0 to 30% average median income, that unless somebody's coming to the table with a whole lot of money here, okay, we have the land, we have the zoning, and I think going into floor area ratios in certain spots, I can easily see UVMU using a FAR configuration versus what we have right now. But when you get into that, our experience as well when it comes to parking, I get it. But when I saw Seattle up there, that, oh, it adds X amount of dollars, because Seattle is different. They have transportation, okay? We do not. And I want to say, people in the lower income bands probably have 3 cars. One's a beater that they use pieces out of to get the other one going. I'm not saying that, you know, I'm being a little bit playful here as well. But we've been through a lot of this stuff, specifically ADUs, and we've had conversation here as well, and it's the state that mandated now 2 ADUs per dwelling unit. We started off with 1 when we knew that was coming through, and it was to accommodate what we can accommodate here in the city. So now looking back of what the discussion was, this is a lot of outside influence being pushed down on us, that this one-size-fits-all for urban jurisdictions, bringing it into a small rural community, okay? A lot of things are great, but a lot of things simply just don't work for a whole lot of bunch of practical reasons. So that was my comments here, especially on the parking. Some things we can modify, granted, but other things, it's just not practical. Next. Yeah, absolutely, you bet.
Yeah, sorry, I'll go next. All right, so I don't even know where to begin on this, okay? All of the options are awesome options, okay? But I'm agreeing with Joe in that basically every one of these things asks us to trade housing for new population by losing livability for existing citizens. Either whether it doesn't matter whether it's traffic or open space or whatever. So we've basically thrown out Sedro-Woolley's idea of a small community, livable community, out the door if we do very many of these things at once. Like I said, all of these housing options are awesome, but I would have thousands of questions before I'm ready to order these in any kind of normal way. So what I wrote down was loss of small town character, loss of small town values, loss of ease of mobility, loss of livability, space and other amenities. Loss of livability, space and other amenities. It's an unachievable goal because we have ever increasing population. So we can build these houses, these 30% houses, take up the space, lose the livability, and as soon as other people find out that you have lower rents or something, they're going to move in, right? People go on the internet, they find out where low rents are, good school districts, whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's in all of that stuff, and they're just going to move in. The only place that I've ever seen this work or the only place I've ever seen the housing problem solved is in Finland, and they haven't 100% solved it, but they have the livability law, which was housing as a right, basically, okay, in Finland. And so the way that they're achieving it is by, they have a horrible climate in the wintertime. It's cold there, so you can't live on the streets. They have to solve the problem, all right? They have housing as a right. They have well-built homes to begin with. They have a stable or maybe slightly declining population. They're not losing their houses every day to fires and floods and hurricanes and all this stuff. So they have a stable housing of good housing. They have government support, which comes from paying 61 to 63% of your income in tax. They have creative solutions like turning prisons, which they don't need a lot because people have housing, into temporary housing. They have partnered with groups like Salvation Army, churches, and other organizations to help organize supports for people who need the housing. And so what I'm saying is that they have a stable population. They're not growing, we're growing here, okay? So there's always going to be more people wanting in. So whatever we do here, no matter how great the ideas are, there's just going to be more people move in. And we're always going to be behind the curve. And every time we do something, it's going to reduce the livability. Sorry to be a downer, but that's my concern. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go, we'll just go down the line. So I just my general observation of the whole process is that the government's kind of planning for a larger gap between the income bands. And that's unfortunate, but from a building perspective, urbanizing the downtown area, building up, versus out, because we have limited space available within the city limits. I also feel like the more kind of compact and higher housing that you can get around the urban center will also help to revitalize that downtown district, more restaurants, more shops. If you've got people living on top of the historical buildings, or you're densifying the community around there that's walking distance. Those were the things that kind of stood out to me.
I appreciate all the options. I played with your toolkit that you sent out for quite a while, and it is a very nice toolkit. There's a lot of different ways to look at this. I feel like we're trying to protect ourselves from what we learned with Kitsap and Mercer, and actually show momentum forward. And when the state is giving such guidance on ADUs and parking, it takes away some of our control over those areas. But then we're trying to take credit for those things that are being forced on us, if that makes sense. I liked options 1, 2, 3, and 4 until I heard you talk about the impact on the community and how we won't see anything for a long time. So basically you have single-family homes, and we'll change the zoning on those options. But then it would be up to when the property owner sells, or if they try to submit plans for something. I don't feel like it's going to get you any change, really. Those areas, it seems like people live there a long amount of time. I liked the high school option until I heard Nicole talk about how that would limit current owners in that area. So I don't like the idea of the city having the ability to change the zoning in so much that it would keep someone from being able to resell their property. Does that make sense? There was a piece of that you talked about. The Bertelsen property I thought was great. If someone wants to open property up for low-income housing, I think that's a wonderful thing. And it would be worth pursuing. At least that way you would get some momentum forward within the next few years rather than waiting a long amount of time for people to move. And that's basically it from me.
Okay, thank you. Madison?
Hi, everybody. I kind of am looking at this in two ways. So when I look at changing code to allow duplexes, kind of more infill development, I am looking at the opportunity for people, and Pat, you had mentioned like the population growth, but in my peers, a lot of my close friends can't afford to buy a home, right? So they don't have that opportunity to build the equity and get their foot in the door. And the average age of a first-time home buyer right now is 38 years old. And that's a huge loss of opportunity. So when I'm looking at these infill opportunities like duplexes, townhomes, I'm, from a development standpoint, considering the cost or just proposing a different product that a first-time home buyer can get their foot in the door in, build that equity, move on, kind of keep the cycle going, because right now we're at such a standstill. And it's concerning that the average first-time home buyer's age is 38.
I have 33 and 31 living in our house. We're 4 and still living in the same family home, and everybody works, but yeah.
Yeah, it is super concerning. So I kind of look at the code changes for more infill development, less so like major rezoning. I think, well, I have a lot of thoughts. So I think that it's important for us to take into consideration looking at existing neighborhoods and what can be built in them, what we can provide for home buyers. But then I look at it on the other spectrum of like this, the portion of the income band is kind of completely separate from that, right? We're trying to hit a completely different target. I ran a lot of numbers based off of a feasibility pro forma we did for the trail, or BYK did for Trail Road Apartments here. And, well, I don't, do you, how long can I talk? So I kind of looked at the median home price in Sedro-Woolley and took the AMI. So I found in the comp plan that the AMI was 72,140. I'll cite that for you guys, but you guys have 102, so my numbers are going to be a little bit different in here. So the average, just some general information. The average cost of construction for a single-family spec home, spec grade, is $393,000. So that's a $400,000 just in construction costs. Bucko Estates, those smaller lots that fit these single-family homes, they just got appraised at $206,000. So that's over almost $600,000 just for a new construction single-family home. To make that feasible, with the median home price in Sedro-Woolley at $523,000, your monthly payment is going to be $2,500. And if we're looking at now the 102 at $700 a month, there is no feasible way to build a single-family home and make it within that income band. Like from, let's see, from almost 120 down to 0. I think when we are looking at the income band side of things, we really need to be focusing on the multifamily we need to kind of move away from the idea of the single-family developments and things like that and look at a multifamily project development, kind of a different product base. So I see this in two different lights. Infill housing, middle housing, super important for home ownership, for people just to get their foot in the door, for current residents to gain equity. And then I'm looking at this as the income band side of things where looking at changes that we're proposing to the code need to be, it needs to take into account and favor kind of a multifamily product to be able to hit those income bands. And I think that's it. But I have, yeah.
One question I have, where did you get that 102 number? Because I'm more on that 75 number. I mean, I know this town for quite some time. Where'd that 102 number come from?
That's in the comprehensive plan I was looking at.
Oh,
Yeah, but
I
where did that number actually come from?
It was in the,
So it's an average. So if you have somebody in town making $1 million a year, that's skews that
It's
number,
the
or?
50% mark. It's 50% above and 50% below, right?
yeah, so the housing analysis is where that number is pulled from, which is an appendix in the comprehensive plan.
It doesn't mean it's correct.
Yeah, as far as how the math got there, that was done by Facet, so I feel like I'm not at liberty to really be able to explain that. But
The 72 that I found was in the housing element section. But I don't know I just based my numbers off of that one, so.
So we'll double check that before we present the final plan. But I think the reason why there's a discrepancy is the 102 is Skagit County, and 72 or whatever it was Sedro-Woolley.
Okay.
Right.
Well, we should definitely be going off 72 then if we're talking about
That's
housing
why
in
the 72
Sedro-Woolley.
number,
Yeah.
first question, what stands out to you after hearing about these housing strategies? Before you go to the second, you want to offer like any kind of a chance for any?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure who's talking, but can we speak into the mics?
We have one more.
It's God speaking.
Well,
Joe, we didn't hear
that's,
from you.
that's all right.
yet. Sorry.
I don't have a lot more to add. Those were a lot of great comments, a lot of great information. I just wrote down stuff off the top of my head, and I hear the need to give up a lot of trade-offs here. In other words, we have to give up something to get something. We have to really suffer in order to be able to do what the politicians are promising. And I see a lot of impossible political promises dumped on others to figure out. That's my opinion. And I see a deep decline in our city's culture if this has to happen. And traffic is bad now, and just wait till you get that many more houses in this city. I had a hard time even getting to Sedro-Woolley from the freeway tonight coming home. And I don't hear the state saying, hey, we want you to put in a couple 100 million houses out there. Maybe we could help you with another highway or something. But I don't hear any of that. I don't hear any backup help at all. I hear we're out in the wilderness. You guys better take care of what we promised, or else, and you're on your own. And it just, I know, I get really frustrated. So what stands out with me is frustration. And my only suggestion is let builders come up with solutions. Invite builders into the city and say, hey, we want to build 741 low-income houses in the next 20 years. What can you guys do? And then you can close all the building permits for anything that isn't affordable. And so those guys are all out, and they have to come up with solutions to build low-income houses, and they come up with it. And you guys say, that's a great idea. You guys are smart. We never even thought of that. Yeah, we could do that. That's the only way I can see this happening, because in our feeble minds, I don't see how we can do it, because we're not in the business.
And there are a lot of smart builders out there.
Oh, and by
they
the
are
way,
looking at this, yeah.
I looked up where Washington stands in affordability of houses. We're the fourth most expensive state out of 50. We're the fourth most expensive at $660,000. And when you go all the way down to Ohio or Iowa, they're $220,000 average throughout the state.
And we always have been. In fact, that's impressive, because we were number 2 behind Massachusetts. Now we're number 4, so we're improving. Yeah.
Okay, I think I'd like to move on to the next question at this point. Okay, for 2 minutes, silent reflection. Which strategies do you believe would make the greatest impact on meeting housing needs across income levels in Sedro-Woolley, and why? On your scratch paper.
Okay. So that's question 2.
let you finish your last thought. Watch for pens down. Okay, discussion time.
Well, first I'll do it again. So, oh, that's, as an individual that this is my career dealing with real estate as well as housing and looking at other jurisdictions, and again, bringing up the primary, it's not just the housing. You can't take the government approach. This is like an IRS approach. Like everybody's a W-2 employee. Like you're going to only make from this to this. Incomes are dynamic. In my industry, I look at the past 2 years, it was horrible. Where this year, I'm blowing it up. So it's not a static thing that you can say, okay, well, which particular housing styles are going to fit in a specific group. There's people like me. I'm fine in an apartment. I don't want a house anymore. I've had it. I had that 4,000 square foot Woodway home. I don't want anything to do with it. So it's really not an income level approach, okay, because that's going to change unless you're on fixed. Let's say you're retired or you're in need of some type of support with assisted care and things like that. Income levels are dynamic, and hopefully people are always going to be moving up the ladder. So taking a housing supply in a very general kind of way to say, okay, from you're in the AMI of here to here, so now you belong in this neighborhood, or you're from here to here, and now you belong here. I don't see that as a practical methodology, so to speak, in looking at housing in general. Obviously, affordability is a big one, and there's other things that absolutely impact affordability, and that is interest rates. So when you look at 2021 here as to why we had all these different permits, rates were only like 3.5%. Now we're at like between 6.5 and 8. So for every 1% in interest rate, up or down, it affects 11% of affordability. And when rates were so low, in my opinion and my observation, that's why I saw prices on housing explode, because what you could afford at 6% at $350,000, now you can afford the $600,000 home. So there's a lot of factors here outside of looking at a specific income level that's where the slope gets a little bit slippery, because it's dynamic. It's not a fixed situation. But looking at it, looking at the AMI, the way the state looked at it and things like that, and looking at the different techniques that were presented as far as property tax waivers, different ways of making it more feasible from a development standpoint, and using those tools to reduce that cost on the development side, right? So we can get product that doesn't cost $450,000 between the dirt, the utilities, and everything else just to get a single family before you can even get anybody in there and have a profit margin, because you still need to pay employees and everybody else. So the greatest impact for different housing needs on income levels, like I said, that's a pretty dynamic thing. But we had a lot of tools here that were presented that can bring costs down as far as providing the different housing types. And there's other housing types too, like, for instance, condominiums disappeared on the multifamily side. That was typically a first-time home buyer thing. And that was because the state had regulations that permitted massive lawsuits when developers went in and did a 20, 30 unit thing, where all of a sudden house would settle, windows would settle, whatever, and all of a sudden it was a free-for-all. But that changed 3 years ago. So hopefully we'll see more of that style of construction, where now it's feasible because you're not worried about getting the pantsuit off of you on the back end. But all the different styles that we've discussed now over years, do lend themselves to now get retrofitted into a potential affordability scale here. And again, it's the market that's going to make the determinations too. So there's things outside of what we can do as government, okay, that absolutely do apply to who's going to be living where and what their choices are. Thanks.
If you're ready.
What strategies do I believe would make the greatest impact on meeting housing needs? I ran some numbers. And I took our data from Trail Road Apartments. I plugged in the 5% affordable housing at 51 to 80% AMI. So 5% of units would be affordable. There's 67 units in the building. That gives us 4 affordable units. And that gives, just doing 4 affordable units in the building at a discounted rent is a total value loss of over $1 million. So you also have to think about, like Joe had mentioned, the cost of money, the interest rates, right? So on top of that, there's a $791,000 borrowing loss. So our ability to borrow money to fund the construction of the building. I ran some numbers, and if BYK had taken all of the permitting mitigation fees, and it's not just with the city, it was just kind of a package, because BYK had to do wetland mitigation. That was a total of $990,000. So that doesn't even make up for the over $1 million value loss on the building. So it would make our net cost to build 5% affordable units $64,000. And so I played around with a lot of these different strategies just to kind of give us an idea of like where we would be at. How can we incentivize builders to build affordable housing? What Paul Woodmansey, who owns BYK Construction, always says is make sure that you're having your best horse run the race. Private developers are efficient and cost efficient, time efficient in general. So I kind of took that and started looking at different ways to make this happen. Affordable housing fees in lieu of meeting affordable housing unit percentage per project, this disincentivizes, right? The fee probably wouldn't outweigh the requirement of 5%. If there was a 1% construction excise tax for affordable housing fund, that excise tax would be $135,000, and the average cost of construction of 1 unit in the Trail Road Apartments was $271,000. So that's half a unit total.
Pop in real quick.
Yeah.
So I looked into the construction excise
Yeah.
tax thing and with our legal consultation, and that is not something Washington State is allowed to do.
Oh, okay.
Remove that one from the
It had
list.
been noted previously, so I was just like going down the list. And then the one item that did incentivize builders to build affordable housing is the tax exemption program. There wouldn't be a net cost to build affordable units up until 15% of them are affordable. 15% and higher, then there would start to be a net cost. So I don't think it's necessarily wise to require developers to have a set amount of affordable units, because sometimes in the end that's going to make the project not pencil at all, right? Nothing's going to be built. No housing is going to be built, and we need housing in general across the board. But I just kind of looking at all of this, looking at the numbers of things, the tax exemption is what is feasible. so that is the strategy I believe will make the greatest impact on meeting housing needs. I also made a comment of, yeah, no, I'm sure more questions will bring more to light.
Thank you.
Anyone down here?
Okay. I like what Commissioner Fournette said about tag in the builders. Say, hey, we need to create housing, give us ideas, and then what they come up with, then backflow that up to city council, through planning commission up to city council. I like that idea. I like to give creativity to the people that do things rather than me trying to think through that. I greatly appreciate Commissioner Bowman's information about numbers, because that helps me put numbers to something that we talk about all the time, so thank you. I wonder about lowering fees and increasing workload on staff, if that's feasible for this city, because I know that staff costs in all organizations are rising exponentially. And so if we're lowering fees, lowering the income coming in, and then we're giving more and more work to the same staff, is that feasible long-term? I think that the goal is not, in my view, is not necessarily home ownership. It's being able to get into a house. So, you know, the old adage of purchase a house and have 20% down, I don't think that's really feasible at this point. I use my 16-year-old daughter as an example. She has no interest in buying a house. She said, Mom, I'm going to work in a city. I'm going to work in the medical field. I'm going to move where the job is. I have no problems. And I asked my dad one time years ago, like, what's the difference between rent and owning? And he said, with owning, you control your future. Where rent, every few years, you know, you have to see if your lease is going to be renewed or whatever. But I don't think that the goal is necessarily, the state of Washington expects everyone in all income bands to be able to purchase a house and hold a mortgage necessarily. Yeah. And then the cottage cluster, I love this idea. I love the pictures you presented about it. But I also remember in the joint session with City Council, they still have not approved the cottage cluster idea. So it's hard to offer that as an option if we don't, in fact, have City Council's approval for that. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, we're still working on that, and it's myself that's pretty much been the guy saying, let's do this right. That doesn't need to be part of the comprehensive plan at all. We've made changes to code between the last one and this one, but it's definitely on the board. But we've been really busy with trying to get the 10-year comp plan ironed out. So, yeah, we've been working on the cottage stuff now. I think it was before you started.
Well, I remember Commissioner Diamond said, why are we even discussing cottage? And this was, what, a month ago? Why are we discussing cottage clusters? We sent this back to Planning Commission because we had concerns. And so I just thought the City Council didn't seem happy that that was on something we were
never
setting
even
up.
sent, I don't think we sent it up. Not yet.
Well, and what we'd like to do is address all of these things in the comp plan before we, and that's why we put these other things on hold for a while. We want to address them through the plan, all of them together at once, and see how far we can get with that.
Yeah, the comprehensive plan is gonna guide us as far as like how the cottage cluster ordinance might change, right? Because there were affordability incentives and unit lot subdivision worked into that code as it was recommended. So potentially with the changes we're doing through this exercise.
But on the comp plan, it doesn't need to be codified. It doesn't need to be an ordinance at that time.
Correct.
It needs to be part of a policy and a goal. So to get caught up in the weeds, to get the comp plan out and be accurate, all I'm saying is that the actual cottage housing ordinance hasn't, we're still working through that.
As far as the council's concerns on cottage clusters, for those of you that maybe weren't there at the joint meeting, from what I recall, their concerns were parking and whether that would be adequate to serve cottage clusters. They were heavy into the comparison with the wildflower community and how the parking is, the situation for parking is there. And then the other was the reductions and the waivers on impact fees and permitting fees, whether development would pay for itself. So, all things we're addressing at this point. Anyway.
And the only problem with the cottage clusters out there is that it's the wrong solution in the wrong place. Cottage cluster is a great solution, but it doesn't belong up there where the bus runs once an hour, if that, and it needs to be near the services where you can walk, or it needs to be near the bus that moves more often than once an hour, so. Sorry.
Did you want to roll right into your question,
Oh,
since you have the floor?
yeah, I don't have a lot to say. My initial, my initial response was, the best way to solve the problem would be Soviet-style block flats, high-rises, because they're cheap and you can just box them. But actually, I agree with, I don't know your name.
I'm
Madison?
Madison. Okay, sorry, Madison. I agreed with Madison and Joe and Commissioner Jasper that, you know, as somebody who studied architecture, letting the design people do their thing is the best way to do it, and then we can filter those ideas. But for us to sit here and try and come up with it, yeah, so that's all I had to say.
I think it's funny that you brought that up, because that was actually the first thing that I thought of too. I did international business for a very long time, traveled extensively throughout the world, and the first thing that came to mind is socialist country, stick them in a high-rise. Because that's how every other, country has solved the problem, is just building compounds of skyscrapers and of low-income housing.
Yeah, and that's one of my frustrations of being on the planning, that I have had over the years I've worked on the Planning Commission, is that every time we try to do something different and in a better way in Sedro-Woolley, either the state comes down on us or the developers come down on us, and you never get there. And so we always end up just making the same mistakes that every big city in the United States has made and in the world has made. So anyway, that's, so I get a little frustrated with this stuff, as you can see tonight, but anyway, I agree with
Yeah,
with you
those are the
guys
train
that,
stops you don't get off of when you're traveling internationally. Like, oh, it's the low-income area, let's just keep going. Okay, so what strategies do I think will work? I wrote down the grants for land, but how much land does the city actually own that we could lease or grant out? Partnerships with 501c3s, nonprofit agencies, Family Promise, comes to mind. Mixed-use residential, commercial, getting more bang for your buck, I really liked the MFTE option 1 UVMU plan there, because we already have that kind of apartment building above the commercial use, and you've got a lot of area there that could be developed further, and then also the reduction of lot sizes. I grew up on the east side, you roll through my old neighborhood in Bellevue, and there's 4 houses where one house used to be, and so I know that that's how that city is accommodating a lot of their density requirements.
Thank you. Whenever I hear government programs, I cringe. I don't even like grants or anything like that, so I try to think of other ways before that, and I understand some things have to happen that way, but I also thought of high-rise apartments, and I think of China and, all the clotheslines hanging out there, and I thought, well, I guess we could do high-rise apartments here. But I liked ADUs, so I started looking into that, and I called the PUD today, talked to a guy there, Mike Demers. I don't know if I can drop names, but I asked him, how much does it cost to hook up a ADU to water? How much, because obviously you got to have water to an ADU. And he goes, well, when I hooked up 20 years ago, it was $2,500. And he said, now it's $11,320 just for water. And so he says, and that's to the road. Now you got to dig the trench and get it to your ADU. So I figured that's about $5,000. So now I'm up to about $16,500 or so, roughly, to just get water to a ADU, and that's not even building it or nothing. And so I got to thinking, we live in Sedro-Woolley. For $16,000, you could buy a perfectly good RV and park it in your driveway and rent it out, and we could have 741 of those in 3 weeks. So there you go. That's my solution.
I've worked
Better,
with him before.
it's better
He's
than my
been
cardboard boxes.
He's-
Or it's better than my shantytown cardboard boxes future.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's transitional, right? And when you get tired of the RVs, they move out. So, anyway.
I live on Jamison Street, and there's quite a few houses
Well,
that
yeah.
have permanent residents inside
It's
their
already
RVs
happening,
and
so
fifth
why not
wheels.
just say, well, okay, let's just do it right, And there's your housing. And like Joe said, you have a good year, you have a bad year. So if someone calls you and says, can I park in your driveway for a year? I'll get my feet on the ground. Say, sure, it's better than living in a car. And then when Olympia says, what are you guys doing? Say, hey, this is Sedro-Woolley Way. You know, this is what we do. So just my idea.
It's a dynamic situation when it comes to income, is really what it comes down to.
Okay. Have we heard from everybody? Okay, we're gonna move on to question 3. Silent reflection time for 2 minutes. Turned off.
The way we're done.
There we go. Okay. What barriers or challenges do you foresee in implementing these strategies, politically, financially, or practically?
All the above.
I got it.
Okay, I'm watching for pens down.
A couple of big thinkers. I like it.
Oh, we done? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm hard of hearing.
You're running the show.
Oh. Anybody want to go first on this?
Alrighty, discussion time.
Hmm?
Discussion time.
Discussion time.
You want to stick with the?
Yeah, we'll go with.
We might as well. Okay, so this is a good question, okay, because it's got a lot of different, very specific items that let's talk about politically. This is exactly what I put, and I'll read it. It can change year over year. It's never fixed, okay? It really isn't. There's certain things that are fixed, like the GMA and the Growth Management Hearings Board. I haven't seen a lot of changes there, but it's always going to be dynamic, to say the least. And I keep using that word dynamic because that's simply what it is. So it's difficult to really have true visibility on the politics, especially in the state of Washington, because there are counties that have the majority of the population that pretty much dictate to the rest of us as to what, and I've said this before, and it's I'm not saying it in a disrespectful way. Other communities and cities have very, very different challenges, and I don't use the word problem, okay, challenges that need to accommodate what their situations are that are not going to apply to the cities of Vader, Castle Rock, Sedro-Woolley, Concrete. So a one-size-fits-all approach on that political end is always something that's moving around, that's very difficult for us. Now that we heard that the last thing that now we're scrambling to accommodate that 0 through 30 AMI in our comp plan, right? That this is something that came in new that we're spending a lot of time on. Financially, okay, that is a monster, massive issue. The cost of money, okay, is a big deal. Also, when you upzone something, you're going to upzone the cost. And I'm going to give you a classic example. I could have one side of the street that has a certain zone, and directly across the street, that property will be only worth 1/10 of what it is because of that line. So depending on what we do with different rezones and this, that, and the other thing, depending on who has that ownership, it will absolutely affect the cost of that dirt, period. And this is one thing that plays into what I just spoke about. Practicality. Just because we zone something, whatever, it doesn't mean it's necessarily practical. And here's an example. We have our PRD in certain areas, anything 3 acres and above. And we were just talking about Michael Demores, okay, from Skagit PUD. The cost of running, let's say your density, you can put 20 single-family units on that dirt, okay? However, that 6-inch ductile iron or 8-inch ductile iron water main is 1/4 mile away, and that's what you're going to require that needs to be on that site. And at $285 a lineal foot to run from point A to point B, that's going to affect the cost. Then we have critical areas, right? Critical areas around here are a big deal, and they should be, right? We got the river, we got a whole bunch of different things. And again, it comes down to the location. One location might be absolutely practical to do a different style or a different type of development, but even though the code still says, okay, well, this is part of this zone and this is what you could do, it might not be practical at all. And then we're looking about, let's say, an R10 zone. Just because you can put that size lot, that's not going to be your net, right? You're still going to have open space. You're still going to have roads. You're still going to have driveways. So you're lucky if you get 60% of that overall area, okay, to actually get that density in. So that's the practical aspects of things of what we do. And that's why these are really good questions, because one definitely feeds off of the other. Thank you.
I agree with Joe on a lot of those items. I think that there is also a large lack of understanding from different viewpoints, and a lack of practicality in the goals that actually need to be hit. Like when we're saying we're going to rezone these already developed areas that are already single family to allow more infill of single family duplex things, I don't know if that, first off, is that going to happen? Because they're doing a check-in, right? They're gonna assess where we're at in so many years, and if that's that in itself takes 20 years to actually produce units, I don't know if that up front is going to necessarily benefit. I also thought of, so if you did a tax exemption for some of these zones where there's already multifamily built, that kind of takes out the equation of the current cost to build, because the current cost to build is a huge killer. That was just another thing I wrote down that's not necessarily all wrapped up in this, but.
A quick clarification on the MFTE. I don't believe it's retroactive.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, new residential construction, I believe, is all you can
Okay.
apply it to.
Well, if you somehow came up with a way to allow current units to transition to affordable housing by giving some sort of incentive, those buildings are already built at a much lower cost with probably a much lower loan on the property. I don't know. It could be. I don't know how you do it, but.
Thank you.
Okay, don't know where to start now. Politically, I feel like there's always seems to be a push to change zoning, and as a property owner, that's a little concerning to me. What am I going to have 5 or 10 years from now, and what changes are going to be pushed down on me? It seems like, and it's not just this forum, but other forums I've been in as well, the answer seems to be raise taxes, raise taxes. I moved here in 2020, and my mortgage is about $600 a month more, and it's all because my taxes go up significantly, and my insurance goes up significantly year after year. And so $600 more a month is a lot for my family, so I can't imagine a family trying to get their foot in the door. Cost financially, so our story, long story short, my husband and I are both retired Army. We served our country. We did it the right way. We came up here. We bought 19 acres. We paid for it, paid it off. So got a nice nest egg to build our dream house, and then started getting quotes from developers. It was going to be $1 million build, way outside of what we would ever fathom doing. And this was at 2020 when you guys were all shutting down. So we just bought our farm. That's what we did. We have friends that just retired from the Air Force, dual Air Force people. Did the same thing, bought the property, saved up the nest egg, and they were just quoted $2 million for the house they were building, and it wasn't even that fabulous of a house. So they stepped out of that, sold the property, and went and bought something that was already on the market. I think that the cost for materials and the cost for labor is significantly overriding anything that people can afford at this point. I think that there's a lot of grant money with the federal government. I was just looking up the impact aid. Oak Harbor School District received $6.5 million alone from impact fees from the federal government. And I know that the entities that receive the most money are the ones that know how to get the grant funding, how to submit the paperwork, how to close it out afterwards. And it would be great if we had the resources to be able to also get that type of money that has been set available, but you have to seem to know the special combination with the federal government to get access to those funds. In practicality, I think just time and resources. And the last thing, talking about getting hooked up to utilities, yeah, we are on a well in our property. And when I moved here, we have PUD that ends at our property line, right at the corner. And I was told it was $70,000 to take PUD across the front of my property, just so that I could have the privilege of being able to do my own trench from my house to it. Completely out of the question at that time. But I think that, yeah, hooking up, everything seems to be so unbelievably expensive right now. And I do volunteer work with Family Promise and listening to the families that want to talk about what they're going through. It's really hard to get your foot in the door. So I think the cost to build and the costs on developers, everyone just says, well, someone else will absorb that cost. No, the customers. The customers are the ones, the renters are the ones, they're the ones absorbing those costs. So that's me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say ditto. So the first one I actually wrote down was environmental limits and impacts. You know, we live in an area where it rains 9 months out of the year, and if you have a puddle on your property, then whoop, wetland, you know, you can't do anything. And if you want to do anything, it's going to cost you, you know, an egregious amount of money to like rezone or mitigate. And so I feel like there's a lot of environmental limitations on what you can build, where you can build, how you can build. You know, we had friends that were looking at purchasing Eagle Haven and wanting to turn that into a bigger venue, and the limits on what you can do with agricultural property and things like that were pretty crazy. Costs, I too looked at putting an ADU on my property. It was $30,000 just to get water, and then we stopped, right? We didn't even look at how much more it would cost to actually build and put in power and all those other things, because it, you know, water, you know, we can't even turn on a faucet, so. And then the processing time for approvals. I had a friend who had 5 acres. She subdivided it so that they could sell 2.5, and it took them 3 years and $35,000. So I just think it's incredibly expensive to do anything in the state of Washington, and it takes a very long time to get anything done. So I think those are the biggest challenges to impact any of these strategies.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree totally with everything everybody's said so far. What I wrote down was all of them, political, financial, and practical, you know, they're all going to be in the way of getting things done. And then the position we're in is caused by unfunded government mandates. Every solution requires some loss of livability for existing citizens. And raising the revenue, I think, is really the major one. Raising revenues, either taxes or private funding, grants or whatever, to offset the costs enough to help anyone under 120% of AMI is in a meaningful way is going to be hard to do. But I did, as I was writing that, thought of something that might be a solution, and it's not new, I'm sure, because nothing I ever come up with is new, but it's something that the city could look at if you wanted to do it, and that is basically allow self-build lots in the city.
Say what?
Self-build lots in the city, okay? And then you might have a program, because you're already asking for money anyway, right, from the wherever you were saying Department of Commerce or whatever gets money and all this stuff. So so you're already in that boat. But if you imagine if you made some self-help or self-build lots, you got some funding from the government, and instead of using it to just buy stock housing out there that already exists, the city hires or has somebody on staff whose job it is to train self-build people how to build their own homes to code, and be a resource for self-build homeowners, laborers, because labor is homeowners, because labor is 60% of housing costs, not for the utilities and all that, but if you're getting to the house building part of it, labor is 60% of the cost. So it's not for everybody, but it's another option. You know, there are young people who I think if they were presented with that opportunity might find that an exciting challenge to build their own house, but they might not have the skills to do that. And so why not invest some of that money into giving people skills instead of just paying money to buy existing houses or something?
That's a question.
It's an idea.
Is it prohibited? There's a lot of kid houses out there right now. I think you can even order it on Amazon. So you could, I'm serious about this. So I don't think there's any, as long as it's compliant with the code, you can still do that.
So, the only place in the code that comes up currently,
Okay.
which will be going away, is that park models can't be used for ADUs. We're going to delete that out of the code.
Well, I'm not talking about ADUs necessarily either. I'm just saying that in general, why don't we become a helping? It's kind of like the idea that somebody had a few years back about like turning the EPA instead of into an agency that penalizes everybody. They charge a big business a lot of money because they spilled some stuff. You teach them how to clean it up, and you use the money to to educate and help them do a better job of running the industry so that they don't cause pollution instead of just penalizing them and then forcing them out of business. And so I see this as the same kind of a thing. Instead of government being a hindrance, government can be a help, right? Because everybody can't afford to go over and take 2 years of trade at a community college just because they want to build their house. But if we had some classes on code and whatnot that people could kind of hit, and then afterwards you can work on your house, and then the planning department somebody in the planning department's there to say, yeah, you need to do this or you need to tweak that or whatever. That's a much better route from my point of view. So anyway, it's just a suggestion. I'm throwing that out there for.
Pat, is that like Habitat for Humanity you're talking about?
I mean, basically, that's what Habitat for Humanity does, yeah, exactly. But they have people that are, they have people like plumbers and electricians and, and framers and everything that are volunteering, so they're all trained already. But then the homeowner does, basically, they're the labor, right? They help haul the stuff, shovel the dirt, dig the trench, all that stuff, paint the walls when it gets down to the decorating. So yeah, it's a lot like, as I said, it's not a totally new idea, but it hasn't come up on our radar in the stuff that we've talked about, so it's just an idea.
Yeah, from what I'm hearing, it'd be kind of an add-on to Habitat for Humanity's concept, right? They do the home construction aspect of things, but then a partnership with them through the city that would kind of add on the planning and permit review and designing plans and that aspect of building a home. So.
Right. Yeah, and I was
It's an
thinking maybe
interesting thought, yeah.
maybe you can get a grant to have somebody be that person on site and give it like a trial run or something and see how it works. And then it makes the city look better, right, as well, right? You're actually helping people get homes. You're not the people who make all these rules that make it impossible to own a home. You're actually trying to get them into houses. So anyway, just throwing that out there.
Thank you. A lot of great ideas. I agree with Commissioner Sexton, Commissioner Jasper. I think you both touched on how expensive it is to do anything, especially environmentally. I put the number one barrier is environmental, and I think that's half the reason why we have to squeeze everybody into the city, because they don't want us going north of here, because that would ruin a creek or a blade of grass or a cattail or something. But so we all have to stay compacted in here. And I've got 4 acres of perfectly buildable land, and I asked an outfit if they could build affordable housing on it, and they said, yeah, that we could do 18 houses here. And they said, let's start with the wetlands study, and it came back indecisive, and they said, well, I don't think we want to get involved with all the mitigation that's got to happen. So I'll just maybe put a ADU or 2 out there instead of 18 houses, because if I can even do that. But so I would say the biggest barrier is environmental. If people love the earth more than they love people, we're not going to have any space to put people. That's my opinion. And then skyrocketing prices. There's too many rules, regulations, too many demands from Olympia, sky-high costs for everything, including utilities, impact fees, property taxes, wetlands mitigation, various government land studies, interest rates, delays in approvals, time is money. When all these things start happening, people just say, "Oh, forget it. I'm just going to keep my land." So, lots of barriers.
Thank you. I'm just taking my notes. Okay. Let's move on. Question 4. Okay. Silent reflection for 2 minutes. Which strategies align most strongly with Sedro-Woolley's community values and long-term vision?
So that's 2 minutes?
Okay,
Okay.
all done. How many more questions do we have?
7.
7 more? or
Is there a
7 total?
time limit?
This is an important topic, and we're gonna go through.
Because wait, you have 7 questions?
There are 7 questions.
We're
Seven
half-
total.
we're
We'll be
We're here
halfway.
at 10 o'clock tonight.
A little over half, so.
We're gonna
Okay.
get through housing. I don't know what to tell you.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll quit
discuss.
talking. Joe, you want to start again?
Yeah, so question 4, which strategies align most strongly with Sedro-Woolley's community values and long-term vision? Well, I was a little bit more specific. I see everything that you presented here as fairly minor modifications to existing code. The new site-specific inclusions identified to accommodate some of the specific affordable housing solutions are worth exploration. So I'm not seeing anything in what we've discussed here or even in here. There are things that wouldn't have come up anyway. So Sedro-Woolley specific, well, there's a lot of things in here that are not Sedro-Woolley specific. I'm just gonna throw that out there that we've already talked about. Again, we're trying to accommodate something that's external to what is typically the process that we have abided by for as long as I've been here, and pretty much Pat as long as he's been here. I think we're the 2 senior guys, that now we're going outside because we had a 10-year comp plan coming up that now has something new that just came in through the state on that, the 0 through 30 accommodation. But what you've presented here, yeah, they're site-specific solutions to a couple of them, and they're definitely worth taking a look at.
Thank you.
I also agree that it's hard to look at these and be like, oh yeah, these align with what we want in Sedro-Woolley. Some of them that are kind of similar that don't feel like a big deal. The single wide, I don't think I wouldn't pay too much attention from a single wide to a double wide if we already allow double wides. I think the smaller lot sizing, I live in the neighborhood that has the 40 by 120 square foot lots, and it's the cutest place ever. I love my little street with our little houses and our little lots. I think that you can make a little lot beautiful with a little house on it. I think that one aligns fine. And yeah, I think it's just hard to look at these options and think about the overall growing pains that we're going to face just with the general population increase. It's hard to imagine how our infrastructure is going to be able to keep up with the numbers shown on the screen, the general total increase. It's hard to imagine how our area is going to change, you know? But yeah, that's kind of what I got.
Thank you.
I think I'm next then. I'm interested in the Swift one. I think that's interesting. I think that's a beautiful property out there. I got to go out there with some volunteer work with Job Corps, and I thought it was beautiful out there, and it'd be interesting to maybe develop something like that. The MFT option 1, I agree with that option, possibly. Sort of on the main thoroughfare, possibly could bring business in to our community. The Bendelson property is interesting if someone's wanting to help with low-income housing. I think that we should support that. I don't have an issue with the single mobile homes. I think that there's a large amount of people that are retiring and their retirement income's lower than expected, and being able to lower costs, and they're wanting to live in a single wide manufactured home. Let them do that, especially when we're offering 2 ADUs on a property. That's it, thank you.
This is the ladies' first round?
Yep.
Okay, so what strategies align with Sedro-Woolley values and values and vision? I said none, because, after a year and a half on the planning commission, And being able to kind of come to some of the joint sessions with the wards too, it just feels like we're trying really hard to keep that small town feel. And when you start increasing density and height and things, you are losing some of that small town charm. Now, with that being said, with what's been presented, the MFTE options 3 and 1, I think are probably the most viable options in the packet. You've got a builder who's got vacant property, there's nothing on it, and he's got a desire to build low-income housing, so I feel like that's your low-lying fruit, where you could start showing to Olympia that we are making progress to hit that goal. And then, what was it, the option 1, kind of over there where Joe already lives and is loving that mixed commercial use and residential, as stated earlier, I think is another good option.
Thank you.
Yeah, I came up with 4, trying to be positive, and I went at it a little bit differently, but anyway, I said, I was just looking at housing styles, not so much funding as the source, so anyway, I came up with cottage clusters are high on my list. If we're going to densify, they increase home ownership and they're highly livable, I think. If I had to make a choice to downsize, probably a cottage cluster would be what I would go to. PRDs are high on my list because they conserve resources in critical areas, because they're really flexible and they save materials to build and therefore cost to build. I like the urban village mixed use because it's creating community and it's more eco-friendly because it's a walking village and bus lines and all that. If it gets built out the way we envisioned it at the beginning, I don't know how that's going to go, but at this point I'm still on the fence about what I see out there. Anyway, that's one of the ones I'm interested in. And then the last was the plexes. If they're well done, they increase density without overwhelming neighborhoods, and they're part of the middle housing. So anyway, those are the 4 that I feel most reflect our values. So, yeah.
I think what would match our community values, like I think you said, none of the above, but or a little bit of all of the above, spread out evenly. But I think what we're used to seeing around here is mobile home parks, single wides, double wides. They're very affordable. They're pretty much hidden from the road, and they're quick and easy to put in. There's not a whole lot of fuss. The truck shows up, it drops off a house, and there you go. That's the quickest way to have housing put in here and at least amount of impact, and it kind of fits our style.
Thank you. Let's move on to question 5. 2 minutes, self-reflection. Are there any strategies that seem less appropriate for Sedro-Woolley at this time? And we've kind of talked about this, so let's keep this next one kind of brief.
and 2 minutes.
Let's keep this one brief, because I feel like we've covered this. But, let's discuss.
I'll buck the system and go first and say, I think people seem to have a disdain for high-rise condos and apartments. Why? They're too visible and they ruin the small-town feel. I'm done.
I'll go next. Rezoning single-family areas, changing the feel of neighborhoods that have been in place for 100 years or more. Also adding a ton of housing very fast before utilities and infrastructure can keep up. I remember going to a city council meeting and they talked about the sewage treatment plant, things like that. So we can add a ton of housing, but are the big infrastructure, big ticket items able to keep up with that same pace? Thank you.
Ditto again. I know I said that rezoning is a great way to increase density, but I live in town and on Township and Jameson, and we already have really small lots, really small houses. You know, majority of the houses don't even have garages. So I think rezoning those areas to increase the density would really be a disservice to the integrity of the neighborhoods, especially kind of our historical zones, Ferry Street, Talcott, Jameson and Township, you know, like it's just kind of that whole downtown neighborhood area. I would personally hate to see higher density there. It already seems like we're crammed in pretty tight as it is already.
Yeah, I ditto. I said anything not mentioned in question 4. And then, but I also said, except for, and I there's like 5 different names for them, and I can never remember. But anyway, basically factory-built modulars, but not single-wide and double-wides, just where they build the house in pieces in the factory, and then they just set it up in 2 days, and it's done. I think there's a lot of really nice stuff out there, good stuff that that would be lasting and be helpful. So, anyway, that's.
Do I go? Or do you
You want me to go?
you
Okay.
sir.
I think that strategy option 5 seems less appropriate for Sedro-Woolley at this time. I don't think that making those beautiful old homes non-conforming uses, right? And what if they wanted to add an ADU for an elderly family member or something like that, and now they're not able to? I think that kind of that's my favorite place to walk. It has so much character. I love the old homes in that area, and I think that and then if you were to turn that standalone multifamily with no commercial, you only get 4 units per building. I don't know if that's very beneficial. I think preserve that core historical cutesy part of Sedro.
She's talking about the zoning change to Central Business District, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I noticed that both of those options, I don't remember which 2, but it was 5 definitely, and then the other one takes out Talcott Street, which is also our other pretty street that, it's got bumpy sidewalks and stuff, but it's one of the other really pretty streets in town. I hate to see that all go under 6-story buildings. It will eventually, but hopefully not in my lifetime.
Okay, so I've been outspoken about this since the beginning when we started the discussion with Facet. I'm going to put it out there. When we did this 10 years ago, okay, we were supposed to accommodate over 20,000+ people. When I heard we were down to 17, I was like, yay, because I'm going to read it to you. Rezones to the higher densities where the density models in place over-accommodated the projected growth that we even looked at 10 years ago. We have plenty of room for stuff, and now it's the modeling of the different income bands, so that's a bit of a curveball. However, adding more flexibility via middle housing style allowances in the single-family residential zones, if the property size is sufficient, right, for duplexes, tris, even quads, ADUs, that even increases our ability to have more housing way above the 17,000+ projection. So, yeah, I think that we can tweak what we have, But going in and making major zoning changes at this particular point of what everything that's, a lot of time's been spent of what's already in place. Let's eat what's on the plate, so to speak.
Okay. We're almost done, guys, I promise. Question 6, silent reflection. 2 minutes. Every strategy comes with trade-offs. Which trade-offs feel acceptable to you and which feel like deal breakers for Sedro-Woolley?
Okay, that's 2 minutes.
Okay, discussion time.
Anyone ready? You go ahead.
I haven't started first yet, so I'm
Okay,
just
here
going
we
to
go.
steal the spotlight. So what feels acceptable to me is, I'm a broken record, that mixed use, commercial, residential, the higher density, the UV, MU areas. It's closer to city centers, it's closer to public transportation. We're already seeing some of these zones along Highway 20 where the Starbucks and the credit union kind of went in, being modernized and utilized in that capacity. And so I feel like a little bit like more of that, where they put the hotel on Collins Road, things like that, I think are acceptable for me. Deal breakers for me, living in a historical home in town in an area that's zoned R5, if I were to see higher density going in there and some of these older homes being converted into multiplexes. It's actually one of my biggest fears is I live in the Splain House, which is a 3-story Victorian home, and I'm like, if I sell it, I almost want to put in the seller's agreement that you cannot turn this into an apartment, or a triplex or something, and so that would be a deal breaker for me.
Yeah, I'm running out of steam, so anyway, I just said any strategy is a deal breaker to me unless it matches present livability or enhances it for all citizens, so that's kind of, when I get tired, that's I go to ground.
For acceptable, possibly developing along the state highways for the same reasons that Commissioner Sexton talked about. Also, because the state has to maintain those highways and manage the traffic issues, whereas if it's more in city, that city's having to do that. On the cons, I'm not a fan of overregulation, definitely not a fan of having change that has no impact And if the push is lower income housing, I think that the options that increase the areas of which we already have a surplus, just to say we have change, is not in the furtherance of that.
Thank you.
That was really well said. I think that was great. Yeah, option 5 CBD, I think that's a deal breaker. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for middle housing and a lot of little things. I don't know, it's hard to, yeah. A lot of dittos to everything that was said.
So what would be acceptable to me is, we've called different things called version 1.0. And the reason we call them version 1.0 is to learn as projects are deployed to see if we got it right or did we create the Bride of Frankenstein. And I've said this multiple times. So acceptable is modifications, what we pretty much have in place, okay? And now we're modifying little things, okay? Like we're including cottage housing, ADUs, UVMU 1.0, that the projects there, by the way, are looking outstanding from my perspective. Mixed-use adjustments with more residential and commercial configurations. Talking about our single-family residences, our single-family residential zones. As long as the property can accommodate it, there's no big deal throwing a duplex in there, or trying even a quad, depending on the size of it. So basically, a quad is 4 single-family units, right? But to me, what a deal breaker is, since we've spent extensive time on a lot of these projects that haven't been arbitrary at all. Some things have taken a couple of years to develop with a lot of input from developers, from pretty much everybody. So a deal breaker to me would be remodeling or tossing things we've already done, okay? Because the things we've put in place were based upon the lessons we've learned over the journey. There's things that we intentionally did not do because of other projects that did not pencil out the way we thought they should have. And one in particular is parking. You know, when I see Seattle thrown in there, no, and you know, not for anything for Seattle. We're different up here. People need transportation, and people do have cars. Okay, I'm just saying, that's something where we're always fighting about parking. And there's a reason for it. Everybody's got to drive here. We don't really have a mass transit system that accommodates the comings and goings of what everybody does out here. It's just the way life is in the valley. Thank you.
Last up, deal breakers for me would be tearing down historical neighborhoods to put in compact, you know, make it look like Ballard. All the good houses are gone and the new modern ones are going up and wrecking nobody wants to live in Ballard anymore because of that. But anyway, acceptable, I just thought of it, I didn't write it down, but what if we did nothing as a trade-off? We just drag our feet and deal with the consequences.
There wouldn't be any consequences. Actually, a lot of thought went into things.
This is public, right? Okay, you didn't say that.
I'm okay with that.
I actually am curious, what are the consequences of not following the comp plan? Or what do they do? Do they fine us? Do they withhold taxes? What's the?
Well, it's not like there's police that
Yeah.
are show up, but what they can do is if we don't meet these requirements, we will wind up like Mercer Island and being taken to court essentially, and the finding will be, well, no, you better go do it. If we absolutely do not do it, aside from possibly getting sued by whoever, we could also lose grant funding for projects. We rely heavily on grants from the state to stretch our dollars, so to speak, for transportation-type projects, infrastructure projects, and that's where we would suffer.
So again, punishment
Not recommending that we don't
punishment,
follow, I'm
not
just
help.
curious what the.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, but
And
let's-
that's
not help.
That's been, and I know it's frustrating, but that has been the case for decades. And I did work for a jurisdiction where we did just that. We held out and got taken to the hearings board, and we had to go back. I mean, it's just, you're gonna lose.
No, we're going to accommodate it. Listen, we're making really good progress here and getting some very, very pointed solutions to what needs to be on a comp plan. However, let's not get caught up with Mercer Island's problem, because they have a very, very situational set of challenges for them. Most of Mercer Island, first of all, it's tiny. It's got critical areas all over the place, mainly private property of some very, very wealthy people. So for them to put something in a comp plan, how they're going to accommodate people from $0 to $30,000 a year, that's their problem. We're doing a good job here getting things answered right now. But yeah, that things are very situational, what they ran into. And quite frankly, I have no idea how they're going to put something in there like that, yeah.
Yeah, right, and that's a good point. Kitsap County, too, was taken to task, and others do from time to time. But we are making progress, like you said, and as long as we continue to make progress, I think this came up at one of our, maybe it was at the joint meeting.
It was,
With
yeah.
the question of, will we, if we do X, Y, and Z, will that get our numbers where we need to be exactly? And I
That'd be good.
don't think that's real. But, we've provided the opportunity for it to be real. Now, will it become that? Who knows? There's market factors that play into all of that, as we talked a little bit here this evening, too. So don't make me answer, is it realistic?
We're going to be fine. Seriously, we've made a lot of headway tonight.
We have.
Yeah, we're good.
We have.
What would, I always come up with the silly, simple ideas that are never simple, but why can't we tell the state that we will do these things, but they need to let us increase our urban growth area slightly, and then we can do all of their experiments out in those areas, and then we can decide which ones worked and which ones didn't without destroying the whole city. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I would go for any of these. Any of these things is a great experiment.
Yeah, but that's the county's call. The
Right.
MUGAs and the UGAs are the county's call, and then if you're going to expand them, then it goes down to the Growth Management Hearings Board. So you can put an
Well, I
ordinance.
understand how it
with
all
most of
works.
them.
I'm just saying, can you make that kind of a deal with the state of Washington that you threw all this stuff at us, unfunded mandate, we don't like, what you're doing, but we're willing to put them all in. If you expand our urban growth area, we'll put them out there and do the thing, and we'll see what worked and what didn't without killing our city.
That's on question 7 coming up.
Yeah. Your point is good. It's not something we can do now, but I mean, that is, every time the legislature meets and they start rooting out some of these things, and the idea is, I hope what they're doing is asking the communities how things are going, how's it working, and get the feedback. There is opportunity for us cities and counties to get that feedback to them. And this is all still new, so who knows what happens in next year's legislature. Hopefully, they'll be getting some feedback.
Yeah, it's a policy and goal, too. That's what a comp plan is. So as long as it's identified with very specific items as to how we're going to accommodate it, like I said, this has been a great session, even though it's now 9:30. So question 7, I'm sorry.
Hey, always told me before, as long as it takes, we'll get there. Okay, so let's reel this back in. The last question, and we're wrapping things up. So, I'm gonna turn around one thing. And the biggest question. So, considering everything we've discussed, which combination of strategies do you feel staff should move forward with for inclusion in the city's comp plan and later development regulations?
Yeah.
Are there strategies you feel must be included together to be effective? Are there any strategies you feel strongly should not be included? I recognize we've kind of covered some of this stuff, but maybe focus more on the combination of strategies. I feel like that's maybe a part we haven't touched on.
Can you put it back in focus?
Woody went home, didn't he?
Woody?
Sorry.
He's going home.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay, hold on.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Can't remember enough of it.
Played a lot of button mashing.
I can read it again if you want. Oh.
All right, thank you.
Okay, it's 2 minutes.
I'll start. Staying away from single-family homes. Commissioner Bowen had great information about what that cost really looks like and if it's feasible or not. I like the idea of the multiplexes, the rentals, developments along the highway, the SWIFT. It's not just being able to afford housing now, but it's about being able to keep it. And again, my mortgage has gone up 30% in 5 years, and it's just been the insurance and the property taxes. It has nothing to do with the actual mortgage itself. And so not just being able to acquire housing, but being able to keep it more than 1 or 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Looking at me and smiling, so I guess that means it's my turn. So MFTE 1 and 3, reducing the parking requirements. There's no way we're going to be able to do any of this without the grant funding. Removing the duplex lot requirements, I think would be a good one. Being able to have single-wide mobile homes in our pre-existing mobile home parks would be my only caveat to that. And then the SWIFT Center, I think are all, for me, like personally viable options. And I think we are, we should move forward with, there's nothing, should not be concluded, again, broken record. Please do not rezone 5 and 7.
That's still right?
I think the SWIFT Center is great. Multifamily tax exemption. I think pursuing grant funding is great. I think that looking into middle housing and duplex, reducing the duplex restrictions. For example, BYK had a client that came to us to ask to do a small short plat on the house he lived in. He just wanted to be able to get some income, and he had a really funny shaped lot, and that took me weeks to try to fit that duplex with two other single family homes onto that. And
Did he ever move forward with the project?
Yeah, he's got his fill and grade permit, so I don't know when he's gonna start, but it just was. I've firsthand seen how difficult it is to make that work. Again, not sure how realistic some of those rezones are that have existing single-family homes and things like that. Oh, I love cottage housing. I like middle housing and the opportunity for current residents that are renting to build equity and grow here and have their family, and I don't know. I'm a little brain dead, sorry.
Okay, so pretty much everything that everybody said, and I'm just going to add in and just actually repeat things, like modifications to the existing code that we have, and they're really kind of minor at that, to accommodate the different middle housing models, right? But one thing that, back to that requirement in the comp plan to look at the different income bands, because you had very specific properties tonight. So I just put identification of the individual properties, and they were sizable ones, that owners have expressed interest in the overall affordable housing model, and make that part of our land inventory. I don't know how we want to kind of like tweak that. Like, we had a couple of the properties that they expressed interest in the affordable housing. Do we want to put another designation for certain lots? And I've seen it done in so many other jurisdictions, that there's just a little note, whether it's an asterisk or whatever, this is identified as this, that would be compliant with the property tax abatement and things like that. So to actually have a land inventory and a designation that specifies these individual ones, because they were pretty significant, and we saw some major decreases of what we could put in there as far as what you could model up on it. So I think that would kind of be a good fit in the comp plan that absolutely specifically addresses what that one requirement is. And as far as the cottage clustering, I like cottage clustering, and we already have code in place with PRDs. So we have a model that we did for PRDs that said, okay, you can do that density if it's 3 acres or higher. I would even say, let's also include in the PRD to include cottage clustering as part of that type of housing style that we can do in the PRDs, because we kind of already do with 2,800 square foot lots. So why not, if I have a 30-acre parcel, right, to have not that 2,800 whatever, but have the ability, because we already have duplexes, we already got quads, why not pop that in the model as well? Or, you know, look at some of the other zones, but it would still apply to the same thing. So cottage housing, we could already accommodate that in things that we already have, right, without having to reinvent the wheel. Just make it another another housing type that can be incorporated with a PRD. I know a bunch of guys that would actually like that idea, because that's actually a better saleable item, because we have open space requirements on this stuff already. So it would just be modifications and tweaking to something we spent a lot of time on that I think would be a real positive for our development community to say, hey, yeah, we could put single-family housing in there that looks a little bit different than this cookie-cutter, cut-and-paste kind of thing, and have better type neighborhoods. So.
That's a really interesting concept.
Yeah.
As far as the cottage clusters go, the intent there is to kind of spark infill, right? Because PRDs are limited to 3-acre size properties, right? So
Well, it's the start, but you have all different configurations of that 3.
But if you allow a cottage cluster, as we've written up the ordinance, as part of a PRD within that 3-acre development,
Spent a lot of time on that,
then you've
yeah.
got kind of a mixed income,
Yeah.
flexible lot
You bet.
size,
Yeah.
range of unit types. Like, I like that idea.
A lot less work on our side because it's already there. We already have the cottage cluster stuff already started. Incorporate that into the existing code.
That leaves you, Ken.
I just don't have enough time to digest all this stuff. I kind of agree with pretty much what everybody said. Everybody seemed like well thought out.
Can we speak into the mic, please?
sorry, I'm not a numbers guy, so, so I'm gonna take you guys' word on it that some of these things would pencil out. I said all of my question 4, which was cottage clusters, PRDs, UVMU, and the plexus are great. And then also I heard and liked the idea of the Swift Center. I keep forgetting about that one. And then also shadow plats seem like a reasonable idea for me. So if somebody has a larger plot, they can do the shadow plat thing. So yeah, that's it.
We've made it through.
Yeah, I got just a little bit.
Oh, sorry,
thank
sorry,
you.
sorry.
I'll make it quick. Tax exemptions are awesome, monetary incentives for builders, in other words. But I like the idea of R10 zones. As I looked over the city on Google Map, I noticed all the RV parks that we have are about R10s, even though they probably weren't planned that way. But if you count how many there are and look at the property, they seem to be in R10 zones. And I like the idea of RV parks and mobile home parks for one reason. They're quick and easy to add, quick housing, but they can also be modified at any time, like Faber did up at Whatcom County. They took a mobile home park that was on the lake up there, and they slowly turned it into something fantastic with tennis courts and swimming pools and beautiful little houses. And it was a dumpy mobile home park at one time, and now it's beautiful. And I think you could transition, you could get people housing right away and transition over the years into something real beautiful like that with a little bit of planning.
We went there. It's a
Yeah,
really good job.
it's awesome,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's only 6 months, though.
It's what?
It's only 6 months.
Well,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be
But
here.
the-
They're on a lake, so you gotta stay away from the lake 6 months so the fish grow.
All right, so we've made it through the 7 questions. So at this point, I want to thank you for sharing everything, and staff here have taken all your input down on our flip sheet. So at this point, we want to just make sure we're capturing everything you're saying. So this is where we're going to use the flip sheet that's in front of you, your sticky notes here. I want you to place sticky notes on the strategies you feel staff should pursue in the development regulations.
Strategy, what?
Strategies we should pursue
Okay.
in the development regulations. You can use as many sticky notes as you want that you feel represent your priorities. You can write on the sticky notes, you can write on your flip sheet.
Thought I was going to keep these sticky
Maybe you want to
notes.
identify a combination, or you have a more specific implementation idea. Those are great to share. Staff are going to collect these sheets from you once you're done.
And we have 12 minutes for this?
12 minutes, but if I'm looking around and seeing people staring at me, we can end sooner.
questions to try yet. This is more getting leadership feedback for you.
No, you guys have been working hard on it, I appreciate it. Are we good?
He's met.
I don't need to leave, I just need to stand.
Good thing there's no baseball game on tonight.
Still despondent.
We're going to prepare a presentation of 45 slides. We'll just go through that.
We get to watch a slideshow now?
Next time I'm gonna have my husband bring my teenagers to this back row and do this.
There you go. Right.
9 o'clock.
Intimidating. And this is a beach. Great, that's good. Awesome.
Is your leg working? Getting ready to getting your board waxed up? Sure.
On the consent agenda, when we have, you could do it the way that you did, that's fine. Or you could just say we have consent agenda, is there a motion to approve?
Oh, not go
Then you
through each
wouldn't have
one.
to do it individually. But if you want to, you can do it that way too. But either way's okay. Just FYI.
Do you want these?
Yes.
To come before the meeting and get a packet printed versus scrolling through it digitally.
We should have done this in 2 meetings, not one. No, I'm serious. No, but it's, we've never done anything this late, 10 o'clock. It's, you need to focus on some stuff, right? So it's like.
So, it looks like most folks are done here. So I appreciate you guys taking the time tonight. I know it's late, so thank you for bearing with us. We got a lot of information here. It's going to take us some time to go through it, organize it. What we'd like to do is put together a summary type email, all the notes. It's probably too soon to really kind of go through any commonalities or patterns, I think, right now, unless there's something that does jump out at you, but it's kind of a hefty packet here. So anyway, in the interest of time, I don't know, Nicole or Ian, if you guys, or Ashton, if you guys have any concluding remarks you want to make? Go ahead.
Well, I know we had planned to designate a little more time here at the end to share kind of our findings, but because of the hour, we're just going to wrap this up pretty quickly. But I think Nicole and I just wanted to share kind of what our general findings were. It looks like the commission's in general favor of the MFTE, particularly the UVMU and the Benson property. Also interested in any sort of relationship we can build with the Port of Skagit for Swift Center housing. And then, minor tweaks to our code that allow for middle housing, infill development, and things of that nature without doing a sweeping rezone or a massive change to our development regulations.
Ditto, yeah. No, but honestly, yeah, just coming away from this meeting feeling very optimistic about the opportunities that we've shared tonight. And I know there was a lot to go over. As far as the middle housing stuff, I think we can get there for sure. The 0 to 30% AMI, that's gonna be our long haul. How are we gonna get there? But there are ways, and I'm glad to hear that there's openness to the grant funding opportunities and MFTE those are going to be the ways to get us there. So that's it. But yeah, as far as next steps moving forward, the plan is for the next meeting in November that we'll be able to come together, put our heads together as staff here, take your feedback and put together a set of recommendations. So at the next meeting, I'm hoping that we can ask for action from you for a recommendation to City Council. And hopefully there's not going to be a lot of tweaking necessary, but that's our goal.
You know, just a comment. So based on, I'm not going to belabor this because it is getting late. So that 0 to 30, take a look at other jurisdictions. Linwood's one. A bunch of them already did their 10-year. I think Marysville did theirs last year. Take a look at how they accommodated the language that dealt with those lower income bands, because we've already identified properties and just even designating potential different zones for that. I think that accommodates what the state is looking for, but take a look at what some of the more moneyed jurisdictions have done, because it's going to be in theirs, and they've done a really good job. I think Bothell did theirs as well. So let's not reinvent the wheel like that. That's pretty much the plan that we've always had here for a while. So somebody's already done this, and they haven't been sued.
Yeah, and real quick, I just want to reiterate, this recommendation would just be for the comp plan, right? So we're not marrying ourselves to any development regulations at this point. We will be working on that for sure, next step. But first things first, comp plan.
Thank you, Nicole. Good reminder there, too. Our next meeting is November 18th. And thank you all.
Okay, so, Mike, we're over the unfinished business at 9:56. New business? None? 9:56. Anyone want to
I
adjourn?
make a motion to adjourn.
You're on the ball,
Second.
Mr. Fatizzi.
All in
And you
favor?
too.
Aye.
Second by Madison. All in favor? Aye. Okay, we're out of here. Thank you, everyone. 9:56.